Third continuation of our discussion from Canto 3rd, chapter number 5. So far, we saw Vidura meeting with Maitreya Muni, and the very first thing which is described in this chapter is about perfect student who has the right kind of bhav, eagerness to hear about Krishna. Perfect teacher, abhod jatam, who has unfathomable knowledge, who was personally instructed by Lord Shri Krishna, and a perfect place, Haridwar. And a perfect setup, in a perfect setting like this, the idea behind making this point, when we have this right combination, then Bhagavad Katha can go on for a long, long time. So everything matters actually, even a venue matters a lot. If venue is not appropriate, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of distraction. It's not possible. Therefore, Haridwar, has been kind of emphasized there. And then Vidurji begins to ask questions. In the first 9 verses, there are around 7 questions are asked by Vidurji. Why he asked, we discussed all that. And then from 9th verse onwards, Vidurji clarifies, sets his expectations that I would like to exclusively hear about Krishna. Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes, because after those 9 verses or the 7 questions were asked, Maitreya Muni thought, hey Vidurji, you already know all the answers of it. You have heard of it all from Srila Vyasadeva. So why are you asking it from me? And then the discussion begins on the 10th chapter, 10th verse, where Vidurji answers, why I'm asking you to speak, although I know the answer. And very first thing he says, I'm bored hearing Mahabharata. Mahabharata is very boring. It all talks about politics, sociology, family fight, and whatnot. There is very less discussion on Krishna Katha. So I want to hear all these topics in relation to Krishna Katha. Like that, the discussion goes on up to literally up to verse number 16, where some very, very important verses are mentioned. And along with that, we had discussed uh, some points also in terms of why particular questions are asked or some practical lessons. In case if anyone remembers any highlights from yesterday discussion would like to share, we can have few minutes of sharing a recap. I gave you a little academic outline. This is called an academic outline. Kya kya chal raha hai? But discussion was far much more in depth. We almost spoken for more than 2.5 hours on the 16 verses. Anyone would like to recall anything that they remember from yesterday's discussion? We call this as a warm-up exercise. So your consciousness gets warmed up now, is ready to pay attention to what's going to happen next. And what's going to happen next is inconceivable for any human intelligence to perceive. That is Sarga and Visarga. So let's have a nice warm-up exercise. So you become a little present before a little difficult subject matter comes up. So anyone, those of you online, our Doordarshi audience, those who are watching on Doordarshan, if they would like to make a point, we can begin with them. Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhu. Like it's a good venue. Only thing is there is a little noise from behind. Otherwise, this is also known less than Haridwar. There's also some Hari Gurukul, which is making too much sound here. So, anyways, yes, Prabhu, go ahead.
Yeah, bro, yesterday we were discussing that how Krishna helps his devotees. So, connection to that, you gave example of how Ajamila was helped.
What context was it in terms of our
Fourth
discussion?
chapter, Krishna means fourth verse that you were telling Krishna gives knowledge from within.
Okay.
So for that you gave an example of Giriraj Maharaj also. That's Srila Prabhupada when he asked a question that
Competitor, that was about competition. Why would Krishna wants to help his competitor? Okay.
It doesn't help, but Gyanis and Yogis.
Yes. Okay. Okay. What else? There's something very important we had discussed about Srashti. What does this Srashti indicates? Yes, Prabhu. Please describe.
So you are explaining to how Lord is very compassionate.
Yeah, so
Like,
this is Prabhupada's point. Only thing is we have not yet read the Prabhupada. I'll show you where Prabhupada mentions actually this is nothing but compassion of the Lord. I just elaborated. Go ahead.
so you were explaining how actually the living entities come here to the material world and creation happens, destruction happens again and again. The cycle continues, but the Lord is always ready to. He's giving all the facilities for the living entities. Matlab, you were explaining that how Lord is not demanding anything, but he's giving, like he's creating, destroying, and giving all the facilities for the living entities. And
Correct. The point was Lord is described here as Atma Yoni.
uh,
He's self-satisfied. It's not that he's not demanding. Yes, he's completely detached. An example is given of a sky. Everything is within the sky, but sky is still detached from all the creation that happens. Like that, Parabrahman is described. So we were making a point. Although this whole creation, maintenance, destruction is nothing but a costless mercy of the Lord. So I was explaining you the 18th chapter verse of Bhagavad Gita, why Krishna demands causeless surrender, why it is ahituki bhakti. I was making a point there. Sarvadharman prityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. Often we have heard or spoken on that particular shloka. Krishna says exclusive shelter because Krishna is also providing us that exclusive protection and maintenance, life after life, creation after creation. So that's the connection we were making actually. What else? What else? Anything? हमारे online audience
Hare
कुछ
Krishna Guruji.
बताएंगे? Yes, whoever speaks, say the name, please, so I get to know.
Vasu,
Yes,
Vasudev Krishna Das.
yes, Prabhu.
In this connection only, how Lord is so compassionate. So further you were elaborating also that Lord Lord doesn't see the results but the efforts made by the devotees. So you were mentioning that whole life how Vidura tried to bring peace between Kauravas and Pandavas, but if you see external point of view, he never became successful. Rather, the result of the last attempt was that he was kicked out of the kingdom. But then Lord saw the effort which was done by him. So Lord always sees the efforts which is done by the devotee. And Vidura also never blamed Lord for not giving him protection when Duryodhan was kicking him out of Hastinapur. So this is how relationship between devotee and Lord you were mentioning.
Yes. Lord sees the efforts and we see the result. That's the difference. We talked about it. So we'll discuss that. That point will also come now in today's discussion. Prabhupada will make one more point on that. All right, fine enough. Enough of warm up now. Let's begin the main course. So we're going to start reading from the 17th verse, if I'm correct. We read until 16th verse yesterday. And I have to share my screen, right? So they all can see that. So now, after Vidurji have clarified his expectations, have asked several questions, and Maitri was a little confused about what to answer. So in the 16th chapter, 16th verse, Vidurji clarified that, okay, Maitri you can begin with describing what Purusha avatars. That was the last verse that we read yesterday. Kindly chant all those superhuman transcendental activities of the Supreme Controller, the personality of Godhead, who accepted incarnations fully equipped with all potency for the full manifestation and maintenance of the cosmic creation. So, what we're going to read about now, or what we're going to study today in this chapter, remaining chapter, is about Sarga. Sarga will be discussed, and we'll discuss this Sarga topic also from the second canto, and then we'll show you how it is almost same, yet there is a distinctive difference which is mentioned in this canto, not in the previous canto. All right, let's begin with third canto, fifth chapter, verse number 17. Where is the screen? Okay. Is it large enough or should I increase the size of the zoom? Zoom cannon, sorry, of this screen. Fine. Okay. Shri Shukavacha Sa evam Bhagavan Prashtaha Shatra Kausharavo Munihi Pumsam Nihesh Pumsam Nihesh Syarthena Tam aha bahumanayan. Sa evam Bhagavan prashtha. So Sukdev Goswami says, thus being requested like this to Maitra Muni, and he addressed Maitra Muni as Bhagavan. Shatra Kausharavo. Kausharavo is Vidurji. Vidurji thus asking like this to Maitra Muni. Pumsam nihashreya yasarthena shreya yashrehashan, that shloka from second chapter verse number 7. Arthena refers to which is beneficial for all the living entities. Tam aha bahumanayan. And like this, honoring the request of Vidurji, Maitri Muni began to speak. Please read out the translation by Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur.
Sukdev Goswami said, the great sage.
This one.
Okay.
That
Sukdev
I already
said,
described. Yeah.
Sukdev said, being asked in this way by Vidura, whose purpose was to deliver the people of Kali Yuga, Maitreya, giving him great respect, began to speak to him.
So, like this discussion begins now. And Prabhupada's purport, Prabhupada describes about why Maitra Muni is described as Bhagwan. Why a devotee of the Lord is called as a Bhagwan? Please read out.
The great sage Maitreya Muni is described here as Bhagavan because he surpassed all ordinary human beings in learning and experience. Thus, his selection of the greatest welfare service for the world is considered authoritative. The all-inclusive welfare service for the human society is devotional service to the Lord, and as requested by Vidura, the sage described the same very appropriately.
And now Maitri Muni begins to speak. Maitri Vacha. Very important verse. Sadhu prashtam daya sadhu. Lokan sadhu anugranata. Kirtim vitanvata loke. Atmano adhoksajatmanaha. Sadhu prashtam toya sadhu. What a fantastic question you have asked, O Vidurji. Lokan sadhu anugranata. It's not only for showing compassion for all the people of this world. In fact, you are showing compassion to me also. So here speaker is telling to the listener, by asking a question, you're showing your compassion to me also. Kitim vitanvata loke atmano adhoksaja atmanaha. You have given me an opportunity to glorify Adhoksaja, to speak about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Please read the translation.
Sri Maitreya said, O Vidur, all glories unto you. You have inquired from me about the greatest of all goodness, and thus you have shown your mercy both to the world and to me, because your mind is always absorbed in the thoughts of the transcendence.
Atmano adhoksaja. Please read Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's translation. The highlighted.
Maitreya said, O noble Vidura, you whose mind is absorbed in the Lord, showing great mercy to the people, spreading your own glories to the people, have asked excellent question.
So there's a minor difference in how both the translations are, but nonetheless, we discuss about what is mentioned here. But one interesting thing to be noted here, Maitri Muni calls Vidurji as Atmano Adhoksaja Atmanaha, one whose mind is completely absorbed in Krishna. Why Maitri Muni is addressing Vidurji like this? What evidence was there that proved Vidurji was always conscious, or Vidurji was always meditating on the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And that incident is mentioned in this third canto only in the very first 4 chapters which you have read, I believe in the first chapter itself. When Vidurji was insulted, how many of you have an experience if we are insulted? Of course, not to the degree how Duryodhan insulted. I mean, there is one thing when somebody calls you fool and rascal. And there is another thing when somebody calls your mother and father a fool and rascal. Yes or no? What was Duryodhan's degree of offense here? He called Vidurji as a son of a maidservant. How dare he, who is a son of a maidservant, raise his voice in front of me in the whole assembly? And Vidurji was not an ordinary soldier or something. He was a minister, he was a counselor, he was an advisor for Dhritarashtra, who has served all his life protecting the interests of Dhritarashtra. And here Duryodhan didn't call Vidura as a fool or rascal. Duryodhan even went on to an extent that he in fact insulted his mother. So let me just put this way, just to help you understand why Maitreya Muni is saying, Atmano adhoksaja atmanaha. What is generally our response when we are insulted? Forget about if our parents are insulted. It's very difficult. Krishna consciousness, bhaad mein gayi, aisi ki taisi. Yes or no? Our subtle body yells at this way. Externally, you may act sadhu, whatnot. We know what happens with our subtle body, isn't it? जितने भी प्राचीन काल में सीखी हुई गालियां हैं वो हमारी सेटल बॉडी में जोर जोर से आवाज निकलने लगती है बात अलग है अवर एक्सटर्नल बॉडी मे बी लिटिल बिट ओके टॉलरेटिंग व्हाट नॉट बट Viduji's response and action, one is response, immediate response, and then second thing is what he did after that. Both were in the same line. At that point of time, as you would have read, it is mentioned that he thought it's an opportunity for me to skip representing Dhritarashtra at the war. If I stay here, the war is going to happen inevitable, then I would have to fight because I cannot not fight at that point of time. It will become a matter of my duty. So it's good. So this insult that has happened to me is actually a blessing of Krishna. That was his thought process with which he responded. Responded in the sense, he just walked away. He left everything. And it's very interesting. He's giving up his bow. Now, for a Kshatriya, bow is his identity. Yes or no? When Vidura gave up his bow, he also declared that I'm also giving up my designation of a counselor, advisor to whatever role I had for you. Now I don't belong to you. I don't have any designation. I am only have one designation, that I'm a devotee of the Lord, or the servant of the Lord. And what he did, he left Hastinapur and he went all over India, visiting different pilgrimages, places of pilgrimage like that. That's the reason it is said, Atmano adhoksaja atmanaha. In our case, even if we are able to tolerate the insult, everything comes out the next morning when we are chanting. Our mind is so agitated. We remember what happened previous evening and all that. Although we also attempt to chant, but there's a difference. So the reason I'm making a comparative discussion here, here his external action and internal response was in line. Generally, our external action and our internal response differ. Our subtle body has not yet come to that stage. For Vidurji, he was devotee externally, internally. Therefore, Maitreya Muni calls him Atmano adhoksaja atmanaha. And second thing is very interested. Here, Maitreya Muni is expressing his gratitude, not gratitude, in fact, that's okay, gratitude is there. But he's saying, Anugrahnata, you are showing your compassion to me. It shows about the mood of a speaker. The speaker does not consider himself to be so great. Somebody has come and asked me a question about Krishna, but it shows the mood of a pure devotee of the Lord for that reason, that because he has been given an opportunity to speak about Krishna, he is really grateful to his audience. And that's how here Maitreya Muni is saying, you have not only shown compassion to all, but you have shown compassion to me by making such appropriate inquiries. So this is the mood of the speaker, and we discuss about Atmano adhoksaja atmanaha, why Vidurji has been addressed like that. Your mind is absorbed in the Lord, therefore adhoksaja atmanaha, like that. Let's go to the 19th verse. Now, Maitreya Muni will say, well, it behooves you to make such appropriate inquiries. Why? Because your parentage was such. You are none other than the son of Srila Vyasadeva. If the son of Vyasadeva would not ask about or make this kind of inquiry, who would make? So it's not a big deal that Vidurji you are asking. It is already known. So here Prabhupada gives emphasis on the parentage and raising kids in his purpose. So let's take a look at the verse. Naita chitram tvai shattar badaraye yana viryaje. Badrayana viryaje virya shukra, which means you're born from the semen of Srila Vyasadeva. Naita chitram, therefore it is not astonishing. Tvai shattar, Oh, Vidurji, it is not astonishing at all for you to make such kind of inquiries. Grahito ananya bhavena yattya hari ishwaraha. Therefore, it is not astonishing at all. Ananya bhavena yattya, yourself, you have accepted Hari as your ultimate shelter. Your mind is absorbed in Krishna. It is just but obvious because you're born of Srila Vyasadeva. Please read out the translation.
O Vidura, it is not at all wonderful that you have so accepted the Lord without deviation of thought, for you were born from the semen of Vyasadeva.
So, because you're born from the semen of Vyasadeva, you had a great parentage. Therefore, you are like what you are. You're totally absorbed in thinking about Krishna. Just like Parishit Maharaj, he was born to a great parentage. Therefore, he was a pure devotee of the Lord like that. So Prabhupada makes a very interesting point, very beautiful point. All this is a small purport. The two things which are largely highlighted in Srila Prabhupada's purport. The first thing is about how to have a good progeny. We know all about that Garbhodan Samskara. Third canto later on, Kapil Muni chapters will discuss that at length about progeny. And second thing Prabhupada mentioned, there is no issue with having overpopulation. Let there be overpopulation, but only good progeny. The problem is not with overpopulation. The problem is with not having the right population. That is the point. Please read this highlighted part of the purport.
The problem is not to check the growth of the population, but to generate good population on the level of Vidura, Vyasa, and Maitreya. There is no need to check the growth of population if the children are born as human beings with all precautions regarding their birth. So-called birth control is not only vicious but also useless.
This statement can become highly controversial in today's time. The founder Acharya of International Society is saying there is no need for birth control. Have as many kids as you want to have. Like this, where there is so much discussion about birth control, contraceptives, etc., is seen as a pride, as a major social contribution. If somebody is just producing one child or two child. In fact, those who decide not to even have a child, and in certain places they're awarded, the government gives them certain benefits, particularly in countries where you have a lot of population. China is doing that, and in India there's a discussion anyways goes on. But we're saying population is not a problem. Problem is they're not good population. So we should have good population. And then Mehta says, hey Vidurji, I know not only about your birth, but I also know about your previous life. You're not this Vidura, you are Yamraji. And I know how you became Vidurji in this life. Text number 20. Mandavya Shapad Bhagavan Praja Samyamano Yamaha Bhratu Kshetre Bhujishyayam Jata Satyavati Sutta. So all of you know this part of Mahabharata, how he was born. So I know, please read out translation.
I know that you are now Vidura due to the cursing of Mandavya Muni, and that formerly you are King Yamaraj, the great controller of living entities after their death. You are begotten by the son of Satyavati, Vyasdev, in the kept wife of his brother.
And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, he was born in the womb of a servant woman of Vichitravirya, like that. Anyways, these are details. We were making a point in this relation itself yesterday that how in Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 19th chapter, if I'm correct, verse number 5, Prabhupada in the purport write, the laws of material nature are so brutal. I'm paraphrasing it. This is not exactly how Prabhupada writes, but paraphrasing it. The laws of material nature are so brutal, even a pure devotee is not spared from committing a mistake. And that was in relation to Parishit Maharaj, making a minor offense or minor mistake to Samika Rishi. And here again, Yamaraji. Who is Yamaraji? The one who punishes everyone, the one who keeps an account of everyone's karma and accordingly decides the destination of that individual. The laws of material nature did not even spare Yamaraji. Yamaraji also became, from one perspective, Yamaraji also became victim to the laws of material nature and he had to appear into this Bhuloka or Karma Bhumi and take birth as Vidurji like that. That's the point here. Prabhupada's right in the purport. Yeah, please read out the highlighted portion. What Prabhupada writes.
Thus, Yamaraj took birth from the womb of the kept wife of Vichitravirya by way of the semen of Vichitravirya's brother Vyasdev. Vyasdev is the son of Satyavati by the great sage Parashara, and Vichitravirya is the son of the same Satyavati by the great king Shantanu, the father of Bhishmadev. This mysterious history of Vidura was known to Maitreya Muni because he happened to be a contemporary friend of Vyasdev's. In spite of Viduru's birth from the mother from the womb of a kept wife, because he had otherwise high parentage and great connection, he inherited the highest talent of becoming a great devotee of the Lord. Take birth in such a great family is understood to be an advantage for attaining devotional life. Vidura was given this chance due to his previous greatness.
Lord Shri Krishna says, Maya adhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. This prakriti is my energy, is under my control. And we're just making a point that how the laws of nature are so tricky and so brutal. Even the best of the devotees are not spared from committing mistake. I believe yesterday also I spoke briefly on this. Parikshit Maharaj, then Yamraj here and all that. So just to make another connection in this regard, Lord knows how tricky it is to surpass Devi Ishugunamai Mamamaya Dharati. How difficult it is. And therefore, Lord says, Apichet Suduracharu. It is literally close to impossible that somebody would not make a mistake. It's good if it doesn't happen. It was very difficult if the mistake would not happen. But the point is not that we have made a mistake. The point is what we do after mistake. Apiche suduracharo bhajate mam ananya bhag. Even if something has happened, not little, not durachar, what? Sudurachar. Even the most abominable thing that has happened, if a person continues to practice devotional life, that is what counts. And Krishna says, Shipram Bhavati Dharmatma. Of course, it has its own level of understanding in terms of how the society react to that situation, which means an organization, how a particular community where that incident happened, and how individuals have to react. For the protection of the larger community, we might have to take certain actions to maybe, take that devotee from a position, take the position away, etc., etc. The point I'm trying to make, at an individual level, we should never take that as an opportunity to make a joke on that devotee or laugh at that devotee. See, he also became a victim of Maya. Be careful. We are also not that strong that we cannot become victim to Maya. That's the point. We should always have a sense of compassion, always have a wish-fulfilling heart, a well-wishing heart for the devotee, even who have got into some temporary trap of Maya. We should never ever laugh at the situation thinking that how great I am. And look, despite being so senior, he became victim to woman who became victim to Maya and whatnot. We should never have that attitude. If Parikshit Maharaj could not be saved, if Yamaraji could not be saved, तो हम किस खेत की मूली हैं? That's the point I'm trying to make here. We should never have revengeful attitude, or we should not have any kind of grudge towards them. This is the material nature. What can be done about it? So I'm just talking about that outlook. We should be careful of that. So let's move forward. Now, text number 21, after describing like this, and now Maitreya Muni says, after describing his parentage and describing his previous life, now Maitreya Muni says, in fact, you are an eternal associate of the Lord. Bhavan Bhagavato Nityam Sammatha Sanugasya Yasya Jnanopadeshaya Madishat Bhagavan Rajan. Why I say you are an eternal associate? Bhavan Bhagavato Nityam, you are an eternal associate of Lord. Why? Madishat Bhagavan Vrajan. Vrajan means jate away. While Lord was departing from this world, Yasya Jnanopadeshaya, he gave a jnana, he gave instructions to me, he left instructions to me to give it to you. Bhavan Bhagavato Nityam Samataha Sanugasyaha. You are an eternal associate of Lord, like that. Please read out the translation.
Your good self is one of the eternal associates of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for whose sake the Lord, while going back to his abode, left instructions with me.
This is where, in relation to this verse, I was making a point before, and that is Vidurji is described as eternal associate of the Lord, right? Sa anugasya, you're one of the associates, Bhagavato Nityam, and you're recognized as Samataha means recognized as eternal associate of the Lord. Vidurji is an eternal associate of Lord. Lord Shri Krishna personally left instructions for Vidurji for to Maitreya to give it to him. And that Vidurji's life is so incredible that he was a failure, isn't it? That Vidurji was not a successful. So how the life goes on, or how things plays out in our life is not exactly white and black. Even an eternal associate of Lord was not successful in convincing Dhritarashtra. And that eternal associate of the Lord who dedicated his whole life protecting the interest of Kauravas and Pandavas, both. Finally, at one point of time in his life, he was kicked out from his service, which he was doing. His service was taken away from him forcefully. But the point is, again, as you said, Krishna looks at the effort, not the result. How did Vidurji reacted to it? Why Vidurji is counted as eternal associate of the Lord? Even if his service was externally taken away, Vidurji never left his service. Why? Because when an opportunity arises, he went back again to Dhritarashtra, like the 13th chapter of First Canto talks about. Vidurji returned. He went back to Dhritarashtra and he again performed his service. And finally, at the fag end of life of Dhritarashtra, finally Vidurji was successful. So when and how Krishna will reciprocate, when we'll get success, when we'll get failure, is something not in our hands. It's not that because I'm a failure today, it means Krishna is not pleased with me. Does it mean Vidurji was a failure, then Krishna was unhappy with him? And if somebody else gets the result, does it mean Krishna is happy with his service, therefore he is getting the result? Generally, it doesn't work like that. This is our limited understanding of the concept of how Lord reciprocates. Lord does not see the results, although Lord only awards the result. So Lord doesn't count us on that. Lord sees our efforts, and accordingly, Lord awards us. Even take a look at Srila Prabhupada's life. Even before the 66 ISKCON instituted, and then 67 something happened, like the first Rath Yatra happened and all that. Prior to all that, Srila Prabhupada, in one sense, was unsuccessful. His attempts to publish first canto Srimad Bhagavatam, you know that he kept it in Bombay in one of the bookshelf. And after a few months, he came back, and none of the books were sold off. He tried starting League of Devotees in Jhansi. That was unsuccessful. He moved into Vrindavan in one of the ashrams of his godbrothers, and he tried reviving his Back to Garden magazine. He was again unsuccessful. He was said straight no. Then he thought, let me write article for your magazine. Again, he was said no. I mean, he was again and again and again and again. So when we go out for preaching, don't be so result conscious. How and when result will come, it does not depend. It is not that somebody is able to produce result is a pure devotee of the Lord, and who's not able to produce result is not a good devotee of the Lord. It's such a big misunderstanding we have developed because we are an institution. We have got into this result consciousness that if we produce result, then only Srila Prabhupada will be pleased. It's not like that. That's what we say now, for the glories of Srila Prabhupada, let me do this and that. It doesn't work like that. Yes, there is a lot of karma to play into it also. Our past karma also has a lot of role to play into it. All of you would have discussed this in Bhagavad Gita. But that's the point here. Vidurji, who was apparently a failure, he is considered as eternal associate. It's not that he became associate only after he was successful in delivering Dhritarashtra. And that deliverance of Dhritarashtra happens anyways after this episode. अभी तो मैत्रेय से मिलने के बाद ही गए थे ना, तो until now the deliverance has not happened. At this point in time, Vidurji is a failure. His service has been taken away from him, but yet Maitri Muni calls him, you are an eternal associate of the Lord, and Lord have left instructions for Vidurji like that. So there is a little difference on how this whole thing functions. It's not result based like that. You're not only a devotee having a post as Yamraj, but you're also an eternal associate of the Lord in another form. The Lord going to Vaikuntha ordered me like that. Please read out the highlighted portion from Prabhupada's purpose.
Generally, the internal associates of the Lord in the spiritual sky do not come to the material world. Sometimes they come, however, by the order of the Lord, not to hold any administrative post, but to associate with the Lord in person or to propagate the message of God in human society. Such empowered representatives are called Saktavesh avatars, or incarnations invested with transcendental power of attorney.
Something very important for us also. So, why do devotees come to this world? As Prabhupada mentions, not to hold any administrative post, but in fact to take a break from the administrative post. So Yamaraji came to this world to take a break from administrative post. And after taking a break from administrative post, what did he do? He preached. So similarly, every temple manager and administrator should go out and preach once in a while to relax their mind, to again become little normal. Otherwise, being in temple, we get so much appreciation and so much honor at times, things can really get into our head. And when you go out on the street, nobody will see you as a temple president, temple manager. you know, for them, every saffron devotee is a senior or junior. The audience, when you go outside, they have no understanding of who's senior and junior. So when you go out, it's a very humbling experience. So why devotees come into this world purpose is not to hold any administrative post, but in fact to take a break from administrative post. Similarly, for all of us to be a long-lasting and long-practicing devotees, at least let's say in Brahmacharya ashram, the post really gets into the head. When people begin to follow your orders, let's say you're a manager, let's say you become a vice president or temple president for that reason, now people have to oblige to your orders when things can really get into the head. And that's the point. It's very important for such a devotee to take a break once in a while, go out and be involved in active preaching, because that preaching would humble us. Because now, if you're giving a program, people are not going to listen to you, honor you, like people do it in the temple community. And particularly if you're dealing with a corporate audience, they will totally humble you out. Don't go and preach to the villagers. They'll do your, Pad Abhishek and all that. No, choose your audience also carefully. See, Vidurji came where? He went into the association of people like Dhritarashtra. That's a corporate audience. They're not going to give you, they're just not going to give you any credit or anything. So that's the point here. It's important for us to take a break like that. That's Prabhupada mentioned here. So next, what happens? So Maitreya Muni says, after glorifying Vidurji, therefore I shall answer your queries. Atithe Bhagaval Leela Yoga Mayoru Brahmhitaha Vishwasthiti Udbhavan Bhavantartha Varnayami Puruvashaha. Translation. Let's read Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's translation. Who has the mic?
I will describe to you the pastimes of the Lord in creating, maintaining, and destroying the universe, nourished by his energy of Maya in sequence.
Go ahead.
First, I will begin to describe the pastimes of the Purusha avatars in answer to your question in verse 5. I will describe the subjects of creation, maintenance, and destruction, which are made powerful by the Lord's material Maya, a special aspect of the Lord's Swarup Shakti Yoga Maya. It is explained in the Narada Pancharatra that Maya arises as a portion of the Yoga Maya.
Hare Krishna. So now starts the favorite subject matter, creation. Text number 23. And now Maitreya Muni begins to answer. So if you really want to get any head and tail of this discussion, it would require 200% attention of yours. And even if you give 1% less to 200%, which means even if you have 199% attendance, for the next 2 hours, you're going to go in samadhi. So you make a choice what you want. All right. So keep your mobile phone away for a while, maybe in silent mode, and pay attention. And I'll try my best to help you walk you through with this, which is a little difficult to understand, but we'll try to correlate things which have been already discussed in the second canto. Interestingly, on the same chapter, the 5th chapter, Only the verse numbers are a little different as over here. So let's take a look what matrimony answers about the creation. Bhagavan ekasedam agra atmanam vibhu atmichhanu gatavatma nanamati upalakshanaha. Bhagavan ek ashedam ekha, which means one without a second. Matha paratram nanyat kinchit asti. Dhananjaya, like that. Ashedam. Ashedam, idam means this creation. So before this creation happened, there was only one person, that was you, existing. Nothing else was existing. Agre refers to prior. Atma, atmanam vibhuhu. Vibhu means to know. Or vibhu also means the master here, Prabhupada writes. So you are existing in your own form. Atma ichha anugatavatma. And when you desired ichha, when there was a desire, or when the desire came into you, at that point of time, you brought about the creation. So how did creation happen? When Krishna desired, or when Lord desired, then creation happened. Please read out the translation.
The personality of Godhead, the master of all living entities, existed prior to the creation as one without a second. It is by his will only that creation is made possible, and again everything merges in him. This supreme self is symptomized by different names.
Hare Krishna. Let's read out what Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes. So, what is happening in this verse? Maitreya Muni is saying, before material creation took place, only spiritual creation existed, which means the Lord existed. There was nothing of this material creation. There was no Maya Shakti, nothing. There were no jivas, nothing at all. There was only the Lord. When it is said only you existed, where the Lord existed, that was a spiritual world. You existed. And Srila Prabhupada quotes the four seed words which are there in the second canto, which Vishnu spoke to Brahma. And Prabhupada again revisits that and gives the definition again of it, that how Mayavadis misconstrue the meaning of it, saying that Lord is Brahman, but however, the Lord is a person. So let's read what Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes here first, the highlighted portion.
In order to describe creation, the prior state is first described. Before the creation of the universe, Idam Agre, Bhagavan, full of six powers, existed alone since everything was merged in him.
So everything was merged in him. The karma, the swabhava, the kal. Karma swabhava refers to the characteristics of the jiva, and kala refers to time factor. They all were merged into the Mahavishnu. And when the time for creation, when he desired for creation, at that point of time, he glanced at Prakriti. And when he glanced at Prakriti, that glance, which is also called as Virya, so there are two things. One is, if you understand the subject matter, you can visualize it or understand in a way how this universe creation happened, or this universe is similarly like something what happens in the womb of a mother. However, it should not be visualized in that way, which means how the child or how the child takes birth, or how does this whole process of copulation happens, is a sexual union through the process of genitals. But not like that happened between the Lord and Prakriti. How Lord impregnated Prakriti is through the glance. So Srila Prabhupada mentions, although it is similar how it happens, just like in the case of a man and woman coming together, uniting together, the virya of the man carries the soul. Similarly, the glance of the Lord carries the jiva. And what was jiva represented by? The karma and swabhava. Plus kala, which was merged into the Lord. Karma plus swabhava plus kal, that is what called as a glance of the Lord. And with that, Prakriti was impregnated. And then when that impregnation happened, then is when your Pradhan and Mahatattva came into existence like that. Similarly, when a man puts the seed in the womb of a mother, and then the process of procreation occurs like that. Only difference is here, man and woman act of procreation is of sexual union, but that is not of sexual union. That's the point of difference. So before this, only Lord existed. That's the point. And even Prakriti wasn't there. Prakriti occurred. That's the reason you read here, right? Which was quoted here. It is explained in the Narada Pancharatma that Maya arises as a portion of Yoga Maya. Even Prakriti was also not there. When the Lord desired, then Prakriti, the portion of Yoga Maya, appeared, and then the rest of the process began. So this is something like the Sarga is something like, you know, the very initial things that happen when the father has put a seed in the womb. All that promulgation and amalgamation or whatever, with the fluid of the mother and the semen of the man combines together, and what all transformation that happens and all that, that is something what has been described. But however, just like Prabhupada and one of the purpose, of course, I'm just hypothesizing here now, not exactly like that is mentioned anywhere, just to give you some pictorial understanding. Like Prabhupada mentioned one of the purposes in third canto later on only, the soul or the consciousness gets revived at the 7th month. For the first 7 months, the consciousness is not revived. The soul becomes active when the limbs have been formed. So it is accordingly, doctors can give you better idea. When the child is in the womb for at least 7 months, by that time, all the limbs have been formed. And then the consciousness becomes active. And that is the time, according to this understanding, the mothers begins to experience the movement within their womb. Like, the movements of the limbs and like that, they experience a little bit of pain and all that. So after that, so now, I mean, anyways, but I was trying to relate to a second creation, that how it happens, that we'll see that later on. But this is the point which is being described here so far, how this creation, the creation that happens there is also happening between how the procreation happens here in the same context. So please continue reading. This means that the Lord.
This means that the Lord acted as the Adhisthana Karan, the basis of everything, and that all his energies, which still existed at that time, are considered the effect. He is the Paramatma, Atma, Atmanam, worshipped by the yogis, and he is the all-pervading Brahman, worshipped by the Gyanis.
So before the creation, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur raises the question, how long was he alone? It started from the pre-destruction of matter, when there was disappearance of the desire to create bodies for the jivas. So for how long was it? Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur raises the question and answers, well, it depends on when did the first or the previous destruction of this creation happen. And how the destruction happens? When the desire to have the creation ceases to exist in the Lord, then it becomes destruction. Like that he says, with the disappearance of the desire to create bodies for the jiva, then destruction happened at that point of time, and the difference is called as the time it took for Lord to create again. So the first paragraph talks about here, Prabhupada quotes about how people have a misunderstanding of the word aham. The four original seeds words like aham evasam evagra, the very first verse, the very first line of that, aham refers to I, which refers to the Supreme Lord who is speaking there. However, the word aham is misinterpreted in a very interesting way. Please read out the highlighted portion. Let us have somebody from online now. Any online devotee would like to read? If you have the right one, unmute and go ahead.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna Prabhu, go ahead.
The word aham is misinterpreted by the Mayavad school into meanings which no one but the interpreter can understand. Here, aham is explained as the supreme personality of Godhead, not the individual living entities. Before the creation, there was only the personality of Godhead. There were no Purusha incarnations and certainly no living entities, nor was there the material energy by which the manifested creation is effected. The Purusha incarnations and all the different energies of the Supreme Lord were merged in Him only.
His case, Ravindra Swarup Prabhu, Prabhupada disciple, he was making a point once. He had gone to attend one lecture of one Mayavadi scholar visiting from India, which was happening in Philadelphia, very famous scholar. And there was a house full program that was there, held in an auditorium. And he spoke to close to 1.5 to 2 hours. And then Ravindra Swarup Prabhu, who was already a devotee, this is somewhere mid of 80s, so mid of 80s somewhere that time, is a scholarly person in that sense. So after the whole lecture ended, then there was chance for question answers. So the speaker asked, any questions? Ravindra Swarup Prabhu raised his hand. And then he asked a question. And when he asked this question, question was straight about like, you're referring Om as this and that, but Bhagavad Gita says Om is Krishna. Like that, there was a straightforward question. The speaker immediately cut him off. He said, "You're speaking too much. You should put your question in a very concise form." Ravi Sarupuru said, "You bored us with a 2 hour of speech, which did not make any sense. And because I'm asking a meaningful question, you're not allowing me to finish my question also." So Ravi Sarupuru was saying that he just gave a definition of Om. And if you look at the definition on Bhagavad Gita, I believe 8th chapter, verse number 3, Pranava Keshava, that verse is there. And then again, later on, Krishna mentions that, yes, I am the sound, but I am the sound only when the sound induces my remembrance, that you find in the 17th chapter when the Omkara is again defined. And this person went on speaking for 2 hours. When Ravindra Sarupuru asked a question, he said, "Oh, you're asking too long a question. Make your question short." So Ravindra Sarupuru said, "Acha, you spoke for 2 hours. You confused us about everything. That was not okay. That was okay, but I asking a question is not okay." Something like Prabhupada is saying, what they speak, apart from that, nobody can understand. And why still they are popular among the academics or among the scholarly world? Because in scholarly world, only those speeches are accepted which nobody can understand. I mean, I was a part of it. I used to attend conferences. I also used to equip conferences. I remember that particular speaker will get the maximum applause, which nobody understood what he said. There was a keynote session once, almost 1,000 people were there, more than 1,000 people were there. And these are not some, there was all big scholars were there. So keynote speaker came and he spoke. And I was a scientist at that point of time. And I was also sitting and hearing, kuch samajh nahi aaya. And he was speaking in my field only. So I was thinking, what a pathetic presentation. And he got a standing applause. I don't know. So I understood. Only thing that says here is how much, if you can confuse somebody, then people think you must have spoken something intelligent. Because that's the reason I'm not able to understand. So that should be right. So that's what is happening here. The personality of Godhead is described herein as the master of all of the living entities. Prabhupada gives an example like this. The Lord existed before the creation, then Prabhupada goes through the example and all that. Although the spiritual existence, Prabhupada concludes with this. Continue reading Vasudev Prabhu. The spiritual existence was there with the Lord.
Although the spiritual existence was there with the Lord, the material existence was dormant in him. By his will only is the material manifestation done and undone. The diversity of the Vaikuntha Loka is one with the Lord, just as the diversity of the soldiers is one with and the same as the king. As explained in Bhagavad Gita 9.7, the material creation takes place at intervals by the will of the Lord, and in the periods between dissolution and creation, the living entities and the material energy remain dormant in him.
So Prabhupada gives an example. Material creation is like, if you consider the sky as a whole creation, the material creation is like a small cloud floating in that creation. And rest of the sky is the spiritual world. So when it is said what happened before the creation, which means the spiritual existence was there, what was dormant or sleeping was the material creation. And then what happened? Then Lord glanced at that. Savaisha tada drashta. Tada means at that time, drashta means saw. Napashya drashyamekara. Mene santam ivatmanam. Shupta Shakti, Ashupta Drak. So Shupta Shakti refers to Maya Shakti, and Ashupta Drak refers to spiritual energy, like that. So Shupta Shakti, Ashupta Drak was manifested, while Shupta Shakti, which means Maya Shakti, was not manifested until that point of time. Please read out the translation. Anyone here?
The Lord, the undisputed proprietor of everything, was the only seer. The cosmic manifestation was not present at that time, and thus he felt imperfect without his plenary and separated parts and parcels. The material energy was dormant, whereas the internal potency was manifested.
If Krishna or if the Lord is Atma Yoni, how can he feel imperfect without his plenary and separate part and parcels? And that too because of us, the conditioned living entities, who has got nothing to do with him. What is the meaning of it here? So Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes, actually, this is not what it means. This is just to, it's just like, It's a metaphor, kind of trying to explain the Lord's compassionate nature. The Lord is feeling pity for all those who have been away from the Lord. And to show compassion to them, Lord does the creation again. Not like, in a sense, the Lord is imperfect. Please read out the highlighted portion of Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's purport.
This is a poetic convention, like the householder feels non-existent, not extant.
Just like the householder, for example, if there is
Existent.
no wife, he feels lonely. That's the point here. Mhm.
This can also refer to the collective jivas who existed only in subtle form, Atmanam, within himself and would later become visible.
A sleeping lover, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes, because all the jivas were sleeping at this point in time, cannot be enjoyed. But he writes further, go ahead.
A sleeping lover cannot be enjoyed, but there were many lovers willing to give the Lord bliss who were awake. He had many consorts, such as a Lakshmi, functions of his Chit Shakti, Asupta Druk. However, for creating the universe, the Lord at that time needed the external energy, Maya Shakti, though she is inferior.
So, what this verse indicate that Lord feeling imperfectness, which means here the Lord has a desire to create, and that is what Prabhupada mentioned in the purport. And this is the purport with which I said this whole creation, maintenance, destruction pastime is nothing but a pastime of compassion. Where Lord shows his compassion to the living entities. Please read out from here what Prabhupada writes in the purport.
The cosmic manifestation gives the conditioned soul a chance to go back home, back to Godhead. And that is its main purpose. The Lord is so kind that in the absence of such a manifestation, he feels something wanting. And thus the creation takes place. Although the creation of the internal potency was manifested, the other potency appeared to be sleeping, and the Lord wanted to awaken her to activity, just as a husband wants to awaken his wife from the sleeping state for enjoyment.
Continue reading.
It is the compassion of the Lord for the sleeping energy that he wants to see her awaken for enjoyment, like the other wives who are awake. The whole process is to enliven the sleeping conditioned souls.
So, why this whole thing has to be done? Prabhupada says, what is this whole process? The whole process to enliven the sleeping conditioned soul for what? That's the Prabhupada's focus on. Go ahead.
To the real life of spiritual consciousness, so that they may thus become as perfect as the ever liberated souls in the Vaikuntha Lokas. Since the Lord is Sachidananda Vigraha,
He likes.
he likes every part and parcel of his different potencies to take part in the blissful rasa, because participation with the Lord in his eternal rasa lila is the highest living condition, perfect in spiritual bliss and eternal knowledge.
So why Lord does his creation again and again? Because Lord want all these conditioned living entities to go back to the spiritual world. And therefore, this whole pastimes of creation, maintenance, destruction keeps on repeating. And therefore, Lord is willing to wait for us for n number of time or unlimited amount of time until we are ready. And the only thing that we have with us is the free will until we are ready to surrender. And Lord provides all the facility for us to go home, back to God. That's the point here. So Lord is the cause of all, and He's also the cause of Maya, external energy. Maitri Muni says, Savaitasya samdrashto Shakti sad asadatmika. And what is the name of this Shakti? Shakti sad asad, cause and effect atmika. This is known as Maya Nama Mahabhaga. And this is known by the name of Maya. Yagedam nirmame vibhu. Yagedam idam. This creation is caused by this Maya Shakti of the Lord. Please read the translation.
The Lord is a seer, and the external energy, which is seen, works as both cause and effect in the cosmic manifestation. O greatly fortunate Vidura, this external energy is known as Maya or illusion, and through her agency only is the entire material manifestation made possible.
And we know from Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Maya Drakshena Prakati. So this material energy is nothing but Lord's energy. Please read the highlighted portion of this purport of Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur.
By his will, Maya Shakti awoke. That is explained here. That energy, Sa, certainly, why has the form of cause and effect, Sadasad Atmika. By that energy, the Supreme Lord Vibhu creates this universe, Idam.
So now the Lord is a seer, external energy which is seen, works as both. So the Maya has been described, Lord is there. Now what happens? The Lord's drashti would fall on this external energy and impregnation happens. Verse number 26. Kalavratyatu mayayam anguna mayyamadhoksaja purushenatma bhutena Viryam adatta viryavan. Viryam adatta, impregnated, viryavan. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is said to be viryavan. So Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes about it. The man is said to be viryavan, which means one who can procreate. So Lord is addressed as viryavan, who can impregnate the material nature. And that viryam, that virya, the shukra, that consists of all the living entities. So kalavartyatu mayayam, under the influence of kala, guna mayam adhoksajaha. So there are three things that happen. Kala, not three things, the kal, under the influence of kala, and under the influence of this, or which modes of material nature would get activated gradually now. The Purushenatma Bhutena, the Purusha incarnation of the Lord, which means the Mahavishnu, he glances and he impregnates this Prakriti with the living entities. Let's read Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's explanation here. Translation and the purport by him.
Bhagavan, Lord of Mahavaikuntha, in his Swamsa expansion as the Purusha, full of potency at a certain moment of time, placed the jivas into Maya, which became agitated by the gunas.
So here it refers to Mahavishnu, Purusha avatar. Continue ahead.
Bhagavan, the Lord of Mahavaikuntha, the source of the first Purusha, who is the master of Maya, is shown as the cause of all causes, the final shelter. Then the beginning of creation is described. With the initial action of time, Kala Vrittaya, means at the initial moment of inhalation and exhalation of Mahapurusha. Adokshaja refers to the Lord of Mahavaikuntha, Bhagavan. By his Swamsha portion, the first Purusha, the controller of Maya, he placed the Jiva Shakti, a semblance of consciousness, Viryam, in Maya, who was enjoyed from a distance by his glance.
Mama Yonir Mahad Brahma Tasmin Garbham Dadamyam Bhagavad Gita. Go ahead.
The great expanse of Prakriti is my womb, and in that womb I place the seed of all jivas. In the Gita verse, Garbham refers to the mass of jivas. Sridhar Swami and Madhusudana Saraswati explained in this way. At the time of creation, I combine the jivas who were merged in me at pralaya and attached to ignorance, lust and karma with a field meant for enjoying. This action takes place because without the combination of Prakriti with the Jiva, creation of universe does not take place.
So now impregnation has happened. That is what been described, and the why Viryavan Krishna has been described is mentioned here, which I already explained here. So Prabhupada talks about the same thing, and Prabhupada says this is Mahavishnu, who is the first Purusha incarnation, who impregnates the Prakriti. And this is not for the first time. This is a repeated action. And once again, Mahavishnu, after destroying the creation, again the creation happens. So when this glance, the glance consists of karma, daiva, and kala, which is not mentioned here. The second canto describes. We'll take a look at second canto in a short while now. So Prabhupada says we should not understand the process of impregnation by the personality of Godhead in terms of conception of sex. I've already explained that. Lord Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti. He can perform his action with any of the senses. When the cosmic creation is manifested, Prabhupada writes here, let's read out this part up to the end. What happens when the cosmic creation is manifested? Somebody online would like to read? Please go ahead. The highlighted portion of the purport, Srila Prabhupada's purport.
When the cosmic creation is manifested, the living entities are directly supplied from the Lord. They are never products of material nature. Thus,
so question is asked, what happens when destruction happens? When this whole cosmic creation is annihilated, what happens? And so cosmic creation is annihilated, then all the jivas who have not got liberated, they go back and merge in the body of Mahavishnu. And along with them, their karma and swabhava also goes. So when the living entity is given a birth again, it's a zero account. They all carrying their past conditionings and their karmic bank balance. The karmic bank balance only is annihilated when the living entity goes to the spiritual world. But till the time he's here, creation after creation, that whole account continues on. So karma and svabhava also merges along with the jiva, which represents the consciousness of living entity, into the super consciousness, that is Mahavishnu. And now when the time of creation comes, so jiva has not come from Prakriti. Of course, we have all taken birth from mother, that is Prakriti. But who sowed the seed of our existence into Prakriti or mother? The father. So many religions today cannot understand there is something beyond Prakriti. At max, they say the nature is God because everything is coming from nature. Nature is what providing, but the question is raised, but who provided the nature? Nature cannot produce anything on its own. Just like mother cannot produce a child on his own, similarly, we are not coming from Prakriti. We were sowed into the Prakriti by the Purusha. That is what being explained here. Go ahead.
Thus, no scientific advancement of material science can ever produce a living being. That is the whole mystery of the material creation. The living entities are foreign to matter, and thus they cannot be happy unless they are situated in the same spiritual life as the Lord.
Which means life comes from life. So this whole idea that we have come from matter, which means Prakriti, then we can manipulate matter and create a life. That is what Prabhupada is contradicting here. No, that is just not possible. This is a misunderstanding. Go ahead.
The mistaken living being, out of forgetfulness of this original condition of life, unnecessarily wastes time trying to become happy in the material world. The whole Vedic process is to remind one of this essential feature of life. The Lord offers the conditioned soul a material body for his so called enjoyment. But if one does not come to his senses and enter into spiritual consciousness, the Lord again puts him in the unmanifested condition as it existed in the beginning of the creation. The Lord is described here as Viryavan, or the greatest potent being, because he impregnates material nature with innumerable living entities who are conditioned.
Hare Krishna. Like that. So now impregnation has happened. Now the manifestation of creation will occur. But it's slightly or little differently described here than in the second canto. So I'll quickly walk you through with that. But before I do so, how many of you have this book? Any one of you here? Most of you don't have? Okay, so let me just show you a slide here, just so that you get an idea. And then I'll show you what's going to happen. Because unless we see it pictorially, we'll not understand. So, but how do we read through? Because if you have the picture with you and then you read through, then you understand it. Otherwise, for you to correlate will be very difficult. So not sure how would this work out. Let me see. Is it still coming? It's coming, right? If what about if I can have second canto verses here along with it? Is okay? Something visible, right? Control Shift Z. And let me just reduce it. Second canto, 5th chapter, verse number 21 onwards. Let's take a look a little bit what happens here. This is picture is visible to all of you? Okay. So
Your online sharing has to be done.
Oh, sharing is not there. Sorry. How do I share both the screens? I mean, I have put two screens on a single screen. So
Desktop sharing will show us, bro. If you share the desktop.
How do I share the desktop here on Zoom? Do you know? I don't see any option here. Okay. So you do one thing. What do you say? New share. Let's say advanced. portion of screen? Let me try this. Let's do this. Let's see. Hare Krishna devotees, abhi nazar aa raha hai?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Are you able to see presentation also?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, so that worked out. Great. So we're gonna just read out quickly from second canto, 5th chapter, verse number 21. And on your left, what you see is pictorially represented how the creation takes place, which would require a little attention. So let's see what happens. We'll not read the shlokas here, but we'll read out the translation. So let's read out. This is second canto, 5th chapter, verse number 21. I have already told you yesterday morning when we met about background of this whole what topic we are discussing in relation to the previous topics and how in second canto the question was raised. So please read the translation. So any online devotee can read out the translation. Go ahead.
The Lord of Maya, desiring to become many by his own will, accepts time which was merged in himself, as well as karma and swabhava, which were merged in the jiva, through the agency of Maya.
So the glance of the Lord this is a reference which I was indicating. The glance of the Lord consists of karma and swabhava, which are the features of the soul, jiva, along with the kala factor, with which the Lord glanced at Prakriti. Then what happens like this, which was merged in him, karma, the fate of the living entities, and swabhava is the conditionings. Somebody who can read out loudly, we will have local devotee only. I need somebody who can read little nicely so that everyone stays alert. Who is a good, who can read it nicely? Okay, please pass on the mic. Actively with active principle, like that you read out.
The material creation is something like a cloud in the unlimited sky. The real sky is the spiritual sky, eternally filled with the rays of the Brahma Jyoti. And a portion of this unlimited sky is covered by the Mahatattva, cloud of the material creation, in which the conditioned soul who want to lord it against the will of the Lord are put into play as they desire under the control of the Lord by the agency of his external energy. As the rainy season appears and disappears regularly, the creation takes place and is again annihilated under the control of the Lord, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 8.19. So the creation and annihilation of the material world is a regular action of the Lord just to follow the conditioned souls.
Just to allow.
Just to allow the conditioned
आप लोग
souls.
को visible है ना ढंग से? Should I increase the size?
It's fine.
Okay, go ahead.
Just to allow the conditioned souls to play as they like and thereby create their own fate of being differently created again in terms of their independent desire at the time of annihilation. The creation therefore takes place at a historical date, as we are accustomed to think of everything which has a beginning in our tiny
experience. So Prabhupada talks a little bit about it in terms of, how long is this particular day of Brahma only. Then for human intelligence, very difficult to conceive how it all happens. Go ahead.
For human intelligence, it is very
Even
difficult.
in the today field of medicine, the doctors still don't know what exactly happens within the womb of a mother. In fact, the third canto describes far much more in detail what happens in the first day, the fourth day, the seventh day, first month, second month, like that. The modern field of medicine still doesn't know exactly what things are happening. So what we don't know what is happening within us, what we can understand what is happening in this whole creation at the beginning of the creation when we didn't even existed. Go ahead.
For human intelligence, it is very difficult to conceive how the whole creation rests on his expansion of energy. But the Lord has given a very good example in the Bhagavad Gita. It is said that although the air and the atoms rest within the huge expansion of the sky, which is like the resting reservoir of everything materially created, still the sky remains separate and unaffected. Similarly, although the Supreme Lord maintains everything created by his expansions of energy, he always remains separate.
Maya tatam idam sarvam jagatavikta murtina. That's the point being mentioned here. All right. Then what happens next? 22nd verse. Please read out the. No, let's go with Vishnu Thakur's translation. Go ahead, read it.
The gunas are agitated from a state of equilibrium by time. They are transformed into another form by swabhava. The Mahatattva appears by the karma of the jivas All this is under the direction of the Lord.
So this is Mahavishnu glancing have happened, impregnates Jiva through glance, mixed with the Kal factor. The next state, what is called as material nature, is also called as Pradhan. Pradhan in an unagitated state right now is called as Pradhan. And here three modes are inactive, in which means they have not, Sattva guna is separate, Rajoguna is separate, Tamaguna is separate. There's no mixing of the modes of material nature happen. And then under the influence of Kal factor, when this gets agitated, then what is formed next is Mahatattva. And this Mahatattva, now this is not the, this is the best way you can pictorially represent. When this, when this Pradhan gets agitated by the Kala factor or gets mixed, the modes gets mixed, then the prominence of goodness, the product which is formed in prominence of goodness is called as Mahatattva. The product which comes out of this Pradhan with the prominence of Rajoguna is called as Shutra Tattva. And the product which comes out with the prominence of Tamoguna is called as Ahankar, which is also sometimes seen as an expansion of Mahatattva. We'll see here. Takes place, time in the course of time. This is the point. Okay, let's go to the next. Now, what happens from the transformation called Mahatattva? 23rd verse.
From the transformation called Mahatattva, predominated by the Rajas and Sattva, a substance predominated by Tamas. Sankara arose composed of Adibhuta.
Ahankar by Tamas. Ahankar arises.
Ahankara.
Arose composed of three things: Adibhut, Adhyatma, Adidaiva. So this Ahankar, which is formed predominantly in Tamas, because of the mode of ignorance, the false ego comes into existence. And this false ego, and then when this false ego has a dominance of goodness or passion or ignorance, yields three different outputs. With false ego with the predominance of goodness. Now, when it means Ahankar predominantly in Tamas, which means it does not mean does not have goodness and passion. But when this Ahankar gets affected, which is born of Tamas, when it gets affected predominantly by goodness, then what is born? Adidaiva. Similarly with passion, Adhyatma and then Adibhuta. Okay, read the commentary.
Swabhava and karma, a substance predominated by Tamas, Ahankara arises. The word ya can be added to connect this verse with sa in this next verse. Dravya refers to Adibhutam, Jnanam to Adidaivam, and Kriya to Adhyatma. These are three causes of illusion for the living entities.
The gross material elements are called Adibhut. So Ahankara mixed with ignorance gives to Adibhut. Adibhut means earth, water, fire, air, ether, the gross elements. And then the maintenance is Adhidaiva. Adhidaiva refers to the mind and the sense objects. And in the material world, these three principal act as prominent features, namely as raw materials and so forth. This is where the elements are being created for this material world to get into action. No living entity has got any form, nothing. Right now, earth, water, fire, ether, this is elemental creation. This creation is taking its shape right now. The elements are being discussed about here. What happens next? Please read out.
The Ahankara transforms into three types, derived from Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, called Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, and Dravya Shakti.
This is Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, and Dravya Shakti. Dravya means matter. Kriya means the working senses. And Jnana Shakti is knowledge, like that. That's being described here. The three divisions are described. So this whole chart is actually largely based on Vishnu Chakra Thakur's commentary. Because Prabhupada doesn't go into technical details. When you read Prabhupada's saying, Prabhupada largely brings into the concept of how you understand how you're affected today. How the false ego, bewilders a person like that, Prabhupada goes. So how does this whole chart comes is because Vishnu Chakra Thakur have given some details into it. Please go ahead.
The three divisions are described that derived from Sattva Gun,
So Sattva Guna is called Vaikarika, which we'll also see in this chapter. Rajoguna is called Taijasaha and Tamoguna is called Tamasaha. These are the Sanskrit terminologies for it.
The quality in verse order are Dravya, Kriya, and Jnana Shakti. The Dravya Shakti has the capacity to produce the five gross elements, starting with ether. The Kriya Shakti has
so Dravya Shakti creates earth, water, fire, air, ether. This is that Shakti which produces. Kriya Shakti produces senses. knowledge acquiring senses and working senses. The Jnana Shakti produces sense devatas. O Narada, you know all this. Now, the state of equilibrium is called pradhan. So this is called pradhan. I'm not sure why they have not written here, but this is called as pradhan. By the agitation of time, the predominance of sattva produces mahatattva. You getting it? This pradhan, when agitated by time, but has a predominance of sattva, this is what is called as mahatattva. Now, what is mahatattva? We'll see in this chapter. Prabhupada gives a very nice definition. Mahatattva is nothing but a complete, this is the mahatattva which consists of jivas. All the living entities are right now in mahatattva, that's the thing. The predominance of rajas produces sutra tattva, which is a type of mahatattva. Only this thing is explained, so I have no idea what is sutra tattva. This is only mentioned. Okay. Predominance of tamas produces ahankara. Like that, these three comes. The effect of ahankara with predominance of tamas and with rajas and sattva elements in much less amount produces the 5 gross elements like that. Okay. So I know this is 12:05. If I can request for another 10 minutes, we'll finish this discussion because we come after a break. Then the whole destruction would happen of this creation, which we would have done. I would not like to do a creation again. For the sake of maintenance of what we are doing, let's extend for time 10 more minutes. Is that okay? All right. Please read the next Vishnu Chakra's translations.
From the darkness of false ego, the first of the 5 elements, namely ether, is generated. Its suitable form is the
Subtle
quality
form,
of
not suitable, subtle form.
subtle form is the quality of sound. This arose before ether. Sound represents objects unseen or object from the past and seen in the present as well.
How do I move this guy here? 1 second. So this is what you see in the chart, right? So up to this much has been described. Now Adhibhuta is described, 5 tanmatras and 5 elements. So how does this creation of these 5 elements happens? So as we all have heard, the creation happened with the sound. Om. Even Bible says the whole creation happened because the Lord desired and there was nothing but the sound. So the very first element which gets created is the sound. And from that sound, along with a mixture of time and guna, then comes ether. Ether refers to space. Space, the sound can travel through space, right? Ether. And then that ether again gets mixed with the time and the gunas, becomes touch, the subtle element. And from that touch manifests air. You can experience the air with touch. And like that, these elements happen. Is it making sense how this is happening? I mean, it doesn't make sense, whatever makes sense, but this much should make sense that you can touch the air. I mean, this is how the creation is happening. And then when air, now what it means, ether only has sound, but air also has a sound and sense of touch. When the air breeze moves, zzz, you can hear the sound and also you can touch it. And then from that air comes another gross element called fire. Fire comes from form. And fire has all three, sound, touch, and form, right? It crackles when you burn something and you can touch it, don't touch it. Something wrong will happen, but you know, there's a sense of touch in that. And it has a form. That's how it has been explained. And then from fire, when it again mixes with time and guna, then comes water. Water comes from a subtle element, taste. So ये याद करना है, आपका एग्जाम का सेट क्वेश्चन है ये, कौन किससे आया था, इसलिए मैं आपको याद दिला रहा हूँ ये, okay? So water has sound, touch, form, taste, and then finally manifest earth, which has all the 5 sound, touch, form, taste, smell. Like this is being described. And these are the 23 elements of the creation. Mahata, ahankara, 5 tanmatras means sense objects, 5 gross elements, and 11 senses and mixed state. We'll explain you. And these are the devatas. Dig devatas means the directors, not the directors, the devatas of the directions. That refers to, that is meant by Dig Devta. And now something interesting going to happen when these Devtas have appeared. So all this thing have happened, and then after this, the senses comes into action. Now Vishnu Chakra Thakur very clearly mentions, we don't know chronologically what is happening first. I mean, when this much has happened, let's say this thing has come. Now does Adhibhuta comes first? Adhyatma comes first? Adhideva comes first? That is not very clear. It's not chronologically presented here. Okay. And let's read this. Ether is the cause of the air.
Ether is the cause of air. Air contains the previous quality of sound. The character of air is the prana, which supports the body. Ojas is the sharpness of the senses. Sahas is sharpness of the mind. And balam is health of the body. Prana is the cause of these.
Prana, the air, pranavayu, like that has been described, which maintains. And these all things are nothing. This how this all forms is what being described here. Then what happens from goodness?
From the mode of goodness.
So Karya, ignorance has been described. Adibhuta has been described. Now Adideva is described. Go ahead.
From the mode of goodness, the mind is generated and becomes manifest as also the 10 demigods controlling the bodily movements. Such demigods are known as the controllers of the direct sense.
These are those 10 devatas. So Dig Devata is the controller of the directions. Continue reading.
The controller of the air,
Vayu,
the sun god, the father of Daksha Prajapati, the Aswini Kumaras, the fire god, the king of heaven, the worshipable deity in heaven, the chief of the Adityas, and Brahmaji, the Prajapati, all come into existence.
continue.
From Ahankara in Sattva arose the mind and the deity as well as the 10 presiding deities of the senses. The direct sun, Vayu, the sun, Varuna, the two Aswini Kumaras, Agni, Indra, Upendra, Mitra, and Prajapati Daksha. From Ahankara in Sattva arose mind and its Devata the moon. The other sense Devatas are mentioned. Directions.
So all this is mentioned in this chart. So the names for all the sense devatas are given. That is what is being given by Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur in the commentary, which you see in this chart. Who is the devata for what? Now, okay, I'll ask a question in a short while. Continue.
By further transformation of the
now let's come to passion. So ignorance and goodness being described, Adi Deva, mind and sense devas have taken birth. So interestingly, mind is born out of Sattva Guna, whereas intelligence is born out of mode of passion. That is a point which Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur will note in a short while. Please read.
By further transformation of the mode of passion, the sense organs like the ear, skin, nose,
So the
eyes.
5 working senses and 5 knowledge acquiring senses are born along with this controller intelligence. Like that, these elements, 11 elements, are born when Ahankara mixes with passion. That is being described here. For Ahankara and Rajas, this is your the working senses like this, and like this being described. Okay, you can read this one.
From Ahankara in Rajas arose the intelligence, the Sakti of the 5 knowledge senses, Prana, the Sakti of the 5 action senses, and the 10 senses. The 10 senses are the ear, skin, nose, eyes, tongue, voice, hands, feet, anus, and penis.
Working senses and knowledge acquiring senses. This is the purport. Go ahead.
From the transformation of Ahankara in Rajas arose the 10 senses. The Sakti of the 5 knowledge senses is intelligence, Buddhi. Jnana Shakti comes from Sattva.
So knowledge acquiring senses की जो शक्ति है वो कहाँ से आती है? Intelligence. We read this in 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita also. Intelligence, mind, and the senses. Who is the controller there when Krishna is speaking about the lust? Intelligence there. Then what is the Shakti of the working senses? That is prana. That is how it's been described. Prana becomes particularized as a 5 action. Now, this is it should be understood that air in the form of prana arising from Ahankara and Tamas is also an effect of Ahankara and Rajas. Okay, this is not the thing. Okay, and now what happens? Okay, so this is, we have already read about, I'll conclude with this point. Now, what you have just seen, just to help you understand, this is completely elemental creation. What elemental creation means, imagine you are a landowner and you want to construct something there. And you have ordered all the supply to come and be present there. आपके पास सीमेंट आ गया है, आपके पास रेती आ गई है, ब्रिक्स चाहिए तो ब्रिक्स भी आ गई हैं, मेटल चाहिए तो मेटल भी आ गया है, सब कुछ आ गया है. परंतु कौन काम करेगा? Those positions have been also identified. This will be a construction engineer, this will be work for the plumber, this will be work for the electrician. All that have been designed like devatas. Who's going to do what? But right now, nothing happens. Everything has come from the glance of the Lord, but Nothing has happened is what is being described here. Everything has come. But unless Lord gets involved into each and every activity, none of these actions takes place. So why this whole subject matter is discussed here? Just to show that nothing happens, like all of you have heard, nothing happens without the desire of the Lord. Even the blade of grass does not move. That is the same point which comes as a conclusion from this discussion. Even all of these things have come into existence, but now they cannot act because they're in unmixed state. They don't have the potency to act. Just like when Brahma was born, he didn't know what to do unless Lord came and gave him the understanding of what to do. Please read out now.
O Narada, best of the transcendentalist, the forms of the body cannot take place as long as these created parts, namely the elements, senses, mind, and modes of nature, are not assembled.
So who will assemble them? Nobody exists. Nobody has a body. Body to tab aayegi jab ye mix hoga. So who does it? Brahma is not even born. Brahma is not even born right now. So who does it? So the Lord does it. Lord does the whole mixing. Go ahead.
O best of the Brahmanas, as long as the gross elements, senses, and mind were not mixed together, it was not possible for them to produce material bodies. Coming together by the impulse of the Lord's energy, accepting primary and secondary form, they created the body of the whole universe and the individual bodies in it.
So when Lord assembled them together, then the secondary creation began. Please read.
And when it was not possible for them to make the bodies,
then the Lord
then the Lord entered them. They become combined by his compacting energy and taking primary and secondary forms, created the body of the universe as a whole and the individual bodies.
Like this. This will read it later on. Prabhupada talks about how to understand this concept in a practical example. And with this discussion, and then it is mentioned, please read out. Then when this happened, after 1,000 years, the Lord situated in time, karma and sabhava, brought to life the non-living universe which was lying in the water. So this is all happening in what is that called as Karnai Dakshay Sagar, right? We call it that way only now. Mahavishnu where he resides. This all is happening there. So after all this happened, it remained inactive for 1,000 years. And after 1,000 years of inactivity, then the Lord brought to life the non-living universe which was lying in the water. So the mass of jivas which was impregnated into this prakriti, the technical term is called as Hiranya Garbha. That is what is mentioned. The soul of the mass of jivas, Hiranya Garbhas, like that. This shows the connection of the universe with the Lord. The Lord brought it back to the life. Then what happened?
The Lord Mahavishnu, although lying in the causal ocean, come out of it and dividing himself as Hiranyagarbha. He entered into each universe and assumed the Virat Rupa with thousands of legs, arms, mouth, heads, etc.
So you remember that when Lord breathes out, all the universes comes. This is that intermediate stage, what that description. So that's the reason it's very difficult to comprehend. And then Lord enters into it, and the time between all that is 1,000 years. I don't know what 1,000 years, maybe celestial years like that. Everything is pervaded by the Lord. Like that. As the Purusha is the Antaryami of the totality, entered into the total jivas, being situated, pierce the universe, like that. This is described. And with this particular section ends here. And now we'll go for a break. And after break, we'll just read out this beautiful point that Prabhupada writes. Now, why did I read this? And what is the difference in the third canto? Third canto is also going to talk about the same thing. However, the difference in the third canto discussion and the second canto discussion is, in second canto, we saw about the sense devtas taking birth, they appearing. Now it is said the Lord directly held these sense devtas, and through that the creation happens. In third canto, when all this discussion happens, then after that comes the prayers by sense devtas. So how did Lord came to the rescue of them? The sense devtas offered prayers to the Lord, which is the last section of this chapter from verse number 39 up to verse number 51, where sense devtas. Of course, I would leave you with this question for you to think. We'll discuss when you come back. The bodies have not been created. So how could sense devtas think or speak? However, the sense devtas speak. So there's an interesting reasoning given here by Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, how this sense devta. So don't think this Indra and all that. You can consider here Indra as a father of all Indras. This is not the Indra that we read in the pages of Bhagavatam, not the Vayu. These are not those people. These are elemental gods who apparently also has the same name, but they are not what we know or what we read about in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam, because they happened only after Brahma ji na. जब ब्रह्मा जी नहीं आए तो ये देवता कहां से आ गए? So these are altogether different personalities. So how these personalities who does not have any personality, because the matter has not been created right now, these are all presented in earth, water, fire, ether. When there is no form and shape, when there is no Virat Roop being created, when Virat Roop gets created later on, we saw that, right? After 1,000 years of inactivity, then Virat Purusha gets created, which means that the non-living universe become active. And when Virat Purusha becomes active means now the bodies can be created. The ability to speak, the ability to hear, see, that all becomes active. The question is, when none of that is present, how these prayers of sense devtas are given in this chapter? Which sense devtas are worshipping to whom? That we'll see it after we come back from the break. Hare Krishna. आप सभी का धन्यवाद क्रिएशन में भाग लेने के लिए. आगे का कार्यक्रम जारी रहेगा after a 15-minute break. It's 12:20. Please excuse me for extending the discussion. Otherwise, this big creation would have become a mini creation if I would have given a break in between. So we'll meet at 12:35. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki. क्रिएशन का चर्चा जारी रखते हुए मैं सोच रहा था भगवान के भक्त कितने दयालु होते हैं. The lost devotees are so compassionate and so attentive. While creation is happening, they are sitting awake. While Lord doing his creation, he's sleeping. So what to do this elemental creation is like this only. So nonetheless, we'll continue our discussion on this elemental creation. Okay. We'll soon come to the nice part, which is called as prayers, which are a very beautiful section. Just wanted to give you a little bit of academic understanding also of in terms of second canto and third canto discussion on the same things. So screen is visible? No. Now is visible. Oh, it's not visible here. Please read out Prabhupada's purport and what happened? Yeah. We're talking about the bodily construction and we'll move forward. Go ahead.
The different types of bodily construction of the living entities are exactly like different types of motor cars manufactured by assembling the allied motor parts. When the car is ready, the driver sits in the car and moves it as he desires. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. The living entity is as if seated on the machine of the body, and the car of the body is moving by the control of material nature, just as the railway trains are moving under the direction of the controller.
So what Prabhupada is telling here, now we were talking about that elements have been created, but nothing is happening. Why? Which means the construction, just like, the motor car assembling has happened, but now unless a driver comes, the car would not move, something like that. Just like this is mentioned in Garud Puran, I'm not sure if it is mentioned in Bhagavatam, at least I haven't come across, but heard about Garud Puran, it is said when a person dies, super soul leaves the body first. And then the soul is taken to its respective destination. Which means unless the Lord gets into an action, takes a lead or takes an initiative, nothing happens. That's how. So the body, limbs, and all that, how it gets constructed is Prabhupada is explaining through an analogy of a motor car. Continue.
The living entities, however, are not the bodies. They are separate from the cores of the body. But the less intelligent material scientist cannot understand the process of assembling the parts of the body, namely the senses, the mind, and the qualities of the material modes. Every living entity is a spiritual spark, part and parcel of the Supreme Being, and by the kindness of the Lord, for the Father is kind to his sons, the individual living beings are given a little freedom to act according to their will to lord it over the material nature.
A beautiful analogy Prabhupada gives now. Living entities are exactly like small children playing with the material field under the control of the maid servant of the Lord, which is nature. They accept the maid servant. However, this mischievous little kids accept the maid servant as all in all, and wrongly conceive the supreme truth to be feminine, which means the nature to be the ultimate. The foolish childlike materialists cannot reach beyond the conception of the maidservant, wherein they consider material nature is what being done, the matter ultimately is everything coming from matter. But the intelligent grown up sons of the Lord knows well that all the acts of material nature are controlled by the Lord, just as a maidservant is under the control of the master, the father of the undeveloped children. The parts of the body, such as the senses, are the creation of the Mahatattva. And when they are assembled by the will of the Lord, the material body comes into existence. And the living entity is allowed to use it for further activities. This is explained as follows. So, all these devtas have been created, and if you see, these are sense devtas, right? And now they have to unite all these senses together to give shape to a body. And when there is a yoni, 8.4 million yonis are produced, in which means the bodies are there, then only you can give the jivatmas a place to live. So now the devtas are not able to do it because there is no just 1 second. Okay. Okay, मेरा भक्ति का class चल रहा है, I'll do that after that. I'm giving a lecture class right now. After that, I'll get it. Yeah, yeah. No. So after that, I'll do it. Okay. After 2 o'clock, we'll speak. Yes. Right. What we were talking about? Yeah, the sense devtas, these sense devta means the east of these elements, the controller of these elements. They have appeared. Appeared in the sense is very difficult to say because there is no form and shape right now. But at least it is said Mahatattva, Ahankar, and goodness has given shape to them. So this is how the second canto ends here. Now let's come to the third canto, where the discussion resumes from where it ends in second canto, 5th chapter. Going back to third canto, 5th chapter, verse number 28. We'll just read out this highlighted portion here, which again kind of reiterates what we have discussed so far. Somebody online would like to read the translation? Just read the translation now because we have already discussed in detail. Please read out the translation from verse number 28 onwards. This is Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's writing. Go ahead. Any online devotee.
Mahatattva, the shelter of the universe, which was being created, whose form arises by Jiva Shakti, gunas of Prakriti and is glanced upon by the Lord, transforms itself into another form by the Lord's desire to create Ahankar.
So Mahatattva gets transferred into Ahankar, which we already saw. I hope this is clear. Then what happens next? 29th verse. Continue, Prabhu.
From transformation of Mahatattva arose Ahankar, which is the shelter of Adi Bhut, Adi Atma, and Adi Daiv, which transforms into gross elements, senses, mind, and senses, devatas. It is divided into Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas.
Ahankar mixed with Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. We saw the differentiation created in the second canto also. That is also being described the same way over here. Then what happens in text number 30? Please read.
From the transformation of Ahankar in Sattva arose the mind. The sense devatas also arose Ahankar in Sattva, and from the devatas of the senses, the sense objects being revealed.
You would have studied all this in that time also, right? But of course, I remember it's difficult to remember this part of discussion. But the chart that we showed, you would have seen at that point of time also, right? Kind of thing, at least. Okay. Now, from Ahankar, what happens next? Text number 31. Continue, Prabhu. Who was reading?
In Rajas arose the knowledge and action sense.
So knowledge and action senses, working senses and knowledge acquiring senses came from Rajas. Then what happens in Tamas?
From Ahankar in Tamas arose the sense object, starting with sound, perverted by the Lord, from which ether arose.
Okay. Text number 33. Then what happens?
The Lord glanced upon ether with a mixture of time and a portion of Maya. From ether arose touch, which, forming itself, produced air.
So you remember those, the subtle senses, not the subtle senses, the gross matter, and you can call sense objects, right? This was sense object, right? The sound, yeah, the sense objects that way. So how they are created is the same way it's described, and the mixing factor is time and a portion of Maya. Under that influence, this is what goes on. All right, so I'll stop sharing here. I'll come back to it in a short while. I'll just briefly like to take a look at some of Prabhupada's purports here, and then we'll come to what happens after this. All these things have happened. So text number 28, we read about how Mahatattva gets transformed. And then text number 29 talks about how the false ego gets into an action, the transformation of Mahatattva. So Prabhupada, if you look in the purport, Prabhupada talks about what is the purpose of this whole material creation once again. And something very important, it talks about how false ego and goodness and passion and ignorance works. If you look at the purport, the middle of the purport, you will find the material creation. Oh, I guess I'll have to share the screen only. It'll be easy for all of you then to look at it. We're talking about text number 29 here. Text number 29, and Prabhupada says here, material creation, like this. So in short, rather than reading the whole thing, what Prabhupada says here is, first of all, this material creation is meant for all rebellious souls. Second thing, Prabhupada says, what happens with false ego and goodness? False ego mixed in goodness gives an idea that everyone is God. This was repeated before also. Those who are situated in goodness but are infected with false ego, they consider I am God, you're God. This is Mayavad philosophy. Those who are in passion, they want to lord it over the material nature, or some of them get engaged in altruistic or charitable activities like that. However, those who are in tamoguna, those who are guna, they consider themselves to be the body. Like that, Srila Prabhupada explains here. However, the main thing which is explained here in this regard is all these are nothing but, Prabhupada writes, is merely a mental speculation. There is no reality over it. Please read the last line here. This is the point. Somebody here, read out the last point. The entire material creation.
The entire material creation, therefore, is meant for the falsely egoistic living entities hovering on the mental plane under different illusions in the modes of material nature.
So in this material creation, we have a false ego, and if you see, everything is coming from false ego, is giving a platform for the rebellious souls to fulfill their various desires like that. Therefore, in text number 31, Prabhupada writes a very beautiful purport and talks about what is the chief function of false ego. Please read out. The chief function of false ego, the main function of ahankar, is godlessness, not to accept God. Go ahead.
The chief function of the false ego is godlessness. When a person forgets his constitutional position as an eternally subordinate part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and wants to be happy independently, he functions mainly in two ways. He first attempts to act fruitively for personal gain or sense gratification, and after attempting such fruitive activities for a considerable time, when he is frustrated, he becomes a philosophical speculator and thinks himself to be on the same level as God. This false idea of becoming one with the Lord is the last snare of the illusory energy which traps a living entity into the bondage of forgetfulness under the spell of false ego.
So this false ego. So therefore, how do we get rid of this false ego, or which leads to avidya? Prabhupada says here, the way to get rid of this, the absolute truth is realized by hearing about the Supreme and with submission. Please read out.
The absolute truth or the Supreme Personality of Godhead is realized by hearing about Him in all submission and love from a bona fide authority who is a representative of the 12 great authorities mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. By such an attempt only can one conquer the illusory energy of the Lord, although for others she is unsurpassable, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7.14.
And this importance given to hearing, you will see, is a repetitive theme across Srimad Bhagavatam, any storyline that comes. Second canto begins with that. The subject matter of second canto beginning was what should be heard? Tasma Sarvatma Bharata Bhagwan Ishvaro Hari. You should hear about Supreme Personality Godhead. And if we hear it, and as we said yesterday, I was making a point, the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada's purport to Bhagavad Gita begins with Bhagavad Gita is not understood by reading based on your own philosophical ideas or speculation. Bhagavad Gita is understood by hearing from a bona fide authority. So the whole process of getting rid of this, all this creation, which we discussed about ahankara and all that, it begins with hearing from a bona fide spiritual master. That's how this whole thing is discussed here so far. Like that, the discussion goes on. And now we'll come to the verse where all this have happened. Where all these elements, text number 36. So all these verses talk about the same thing which we have discussed before the break from the second canto. Text number 36 talks about thereafter the water produced from electricity. Electricity here refers to fire actually. Was glanced over by the Supreme Personality Godhead and mixed with eternal time and external energy. Yeah, another very important difference here, you will see in all these verses, there will be a word called Vikshitam. Now, what is this? Vikshitam means glanced over. If you see where this all begins with, the senses are coming into existence, and text number 33 onwards, if you read, I just want to briefly highlight this point. Please read the translation for 33, translation here.
The Lord glanced upon ether with a mixture of time and a portion of Maya. From ether arose touch, which transforming itself produced air.
So this is same thing which was cycle was described there, how different this ether, earth, water, fire, how the gross elements came from subtle elements. But in the second canto, the process was not described how it happened. Here it is said, you will see this word means glance of the Lord. The whole purpose over here, which is described here, is just to show that nothing happens in the creation without the intervention of the Lord. Even all these subtle elements became into gross elements, or gross to the next level of subtle and gross, only happened when the Lord glanced. Second canto does not go so much into details of how Lord is involved into every single stage. Just like it said, like all the elements and the devtas came, and then the Lord got involved, and then after 1,000 years of time, then all that became active. But here in this third canto, when the discussion comes again, it further focuses on how Lord is involved at every single stage of the creation. You will continue seeing Viksitam at every shloka that we'll see ahead. Para Viksitam, then the Lord glanced, Viksitam again, which we're reading in the 36th verse. So here at the end of the 36th purport, bear with me, I'm just going quickly because we have already discussed that. It's the same point. What is the difference? I'm highlighting for all of you. Please read out this last paragraph of 36 verse purport.
The conclusion is that the physical elements may work very wonderfully in the layman's eyes, but their working actually takes place under the supervision of the Lord. Those who can mark only the changes of the physical elements and cannot perceive the hidden hands of the Lord behind them are certainly less intelligent persons, although they may be advertised as great material scientists.
Oh, so somebody may say after reading the discussion, the second canto, oh, looks like the elements got mixed on its own. Or this is look like something like, the how life got created. The unicellular animals, or the unicellular living beings were formed because the chemicals or the cells got mixed together and the life came into existence. So here Prabhupada is making point, no, it seems like that, but the verses here, Maitri Muni very clearly says the glance of the Lord. There is a hidden hand of the Lord behind this whole creation that is happening. And then the verse number 37 onward will begin our reading now. Bhutananav adhinam yadyad bhavya varavaram tesha paranu samsarga yatha sankhyam gunan vidhu. Read the translation, highlighted portion.
O Vidura, one should know that the qualities of each element, starting with the ether, increase successively as they progress towards the inferior, combining with the qualities of the superior elements.
So all the creation of the gross and subtle elements have happened. Now the rest of the work remains for the devatas, for them to process further. Now the 38th verse onwards offers, here Maitri speaks about what the devatas who were created, all the devatas, what did they do? 38th verse says, Ete deva kala Vishnu. Ete refers to all these physical elements that has been described. Devaha, which means the controlling demigods, the elemental gods. Kalaha, they are part and parcel of Vishnu. Kala mayam shalinganaha. Nana atva swakriya anishaha. Swakriya means to perform an action. Anisha means they were not able to perform their action for which they were created. Prochu pranjalyo vibhum. Prochu means bole. They spoke. Prochu pranjalyo vibhum. They spoke to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is a second difference which we find in the third canto, the same swarga which has been described, which has been told before in second canto. So now here, this devatas, elemental gods begin to speak. Please read. So the question arises. No, this is a very beautiful puppet actually. The questions will come ahead now, some interesting questions. So this whole puppet, Prabhupada's puppet also, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's puppet also, is describing about the role of devatas in this creation. And the discussion is about, should these devatas be respected by the devotees or should they be ignored? And here both Prabhupada and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur emphasizes, who are these devatas? They are the confidential servant of the Lord. There is no question arises that the devotees of the Lord, we should not offer respect to them. They are far, far superior. That is how this whole discussion builds up. And then there is a very beautiful, now somebody, the point this is being raised is somebody, these elemental devatas are the one by whom everything happens. They were, for, you read later that for every limbs, for example, let's say, we say Om Keshvaya Nama or Narayana Nama, it depends that, different presiding deity, the form of the Lord, will protect the different parts of the body. And these devatas you can consider as a manifestation of these Vishnus, who because of which this whole body has come into a form. So these devatas, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentioned, are responsible for both the good action and the bad action. If they are responsible for the good and bad actions of somebody happening, then we should curse the devatas. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, no, you cannot. They are responsible for action, but ultimately actions happen because the desire was of the living entity. If somebody has also done a robbery, the desire was of the living entity, but the living entity cannot do anything beyond desire. The 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita talks about the 3 doers. But this elemental devatas just fulfill that. And these are the confidential servants of the Lord. Like that, this whole purport goes. Very interesting. Please, somebody read out. Anyone online would like to read? Please read out the highlighted portion of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's translation.
The devatas of the various elements known as portions of Vishnu and possessing power of transformation, emotional states of consciousness, were unable to perform their functions in creating the universe because they were not related with each other. With folded hands, they began praising the Lord. Mahattattva, Ahankar, and other elements bound by their qualities throw the jivas to Swarga or hell and push them into repeated births. These causeless inflictors should be destroyed completely. One should not say so.
So, these are the one because of which a living entity goes to the Swarga or goes to the hell. So somebody may say, these inflictors because of which we are suffering should be destroyed. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes like this. So he says, no, we should not say like that. Rather, these elemental are causeless assistants and they should be worshipped. This verse explains Jnana and Nishkam karma cannot be accomplished without these elements. The practices for prema, such as this hearing, Shavanam, Kirtana, Vishnu, are also accomplished by these elements because the gross body is what? Through this gross body only we are rendering service, na? And this gross body have come because of these elemental devtas. We are able to chant the holy names of the Lord is because of this elemental devtas. We are able to hear about the Lord because of this elemental devtas. We are able to perform this bhakti yoga is because of this elemental devtas. Therefore, we should understand they are causeless assistant and should be worshipped like that. But actions which lead to hell, such as stealing another's wife or property, etc., are also accomplished by this element, which means through the body. They should not be condemned. And then a beautiful example is given, just like Mother Ganges. Mother Ganges water is sweet and purifying for saintly people, but and there is a mango tree. And both the trees drink the same water, and through that, the tree gets nourished. One tree will give you sweet fruit, and other tree will give you a bitter fruit. You cannot blame Ganga for it. Like that Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur writes, and that's what Srila Prabhupada emphasizes on his purport also. To some extent, Prabhupada emphasizes his purport in terms of how do we deal with the devatas. According to Gita statement, Prabhu, please read this part.
According to the Gita statement, what is the fault of the devotees appointed by the Lord as devatas of the elements who are situated in these evil persons? They are actually.
Sorry, just to let you know which evil persons. Here, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur quotes from 16th chapter about the qualities of demons. So these elemental devatas are situated in them also. You cannot blame them. They are actually advanced Vaishnava. This becomes evident in their prayers, which will be discussed now. So these presiding deities, please go ahead.
These presiding deities of elements such as Mahatattva are called portions of Vishnu, since they function for Maya Shakti. They are the forms of time or transformation, the form of Maya or emotions such as deliberation, joy or sorrow, and the form of consciousness, Amshalinga. Because of not having relationship with each other, Nanatattvat, the elements are unable, Anisha, to create the universe, Swakriya. They began praising the Lord. By the inconceivable will of the Lord, they suddenly possessed all senses and bodies to do this. This shows that they are completely independent on the Lord's will. Completely dependent on the Lord's will.
All right, thank you. And now the prayers by this devatas begin, and which is a very, very beautiful section after definitely creation. Everything will be a little nectarian after a little technical discussion. So here, the very first prayers the devatas offered is how they describe how the devotees of the Lord take shelter of the Lord. Where does the devotees exist? I mean, nothing exists. So how are they saying? Let's take a look at the shloka first. We'll talk about it. Something interesting happening here. Deva uchuhu namam te deva padaravindam prapannatapo pashamat tapatram yanamulaketa yatayo anjoshuru samsara dukkham bahir utshipanti. So Anjoswaru is the word which describes as where is the word devotees? Okay, let's take a look from the first line. Namam Tadeva Padaravindam, we offer our respectful obeisances. Namam, we offer our prayers. Prapanna, prapanna means to surrender. Prapanna. Prapanna, we offer a respectful obeisances, offer respect to Supreme Personality Godhead, particularly to his lotus feet. One who has surrendered to his lotus feet, what happens? Tapa upashama ataptram. The second line, last word, which means who has taken the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. The lotus feet of the Lord acts as an umbrella, protecting the devotee or protecting the one who has surrendered from tapa, distress and suffering. Yanamula keta. Yataha. Yatayo is the word of great sages. Those great sages who have taken shelter. And what happens? Samsara dukkham. They become free from all the miseries of this material world. Bahi ukshipanti, forcibly through. By taking shelter of the Supreme Lord, devotees of the Lord throw the miseries out of their life far, far away. Just like what we call leech, right? Leech hota hai na, jo blood sucking, right? So just like somebody who's, if in case somebody's feet, or if a leech has got stuck to somebody's feet, then what do? You take it out and you throw it far, far away. You just don't go and put it into your neighbor's house. Otherwise, it'll come back to you. Like that analogy is given here. Let's read the translation, then please answer my question. अरे भाई जब devotees थे ही नहीं तो shelter कैसे लेंगे? Please read out proper translation here.
The demigod said, O Lord, your lotus feet are like an umbrella for the surrendered souls, protecting them from all the miseries of material existence. All the sages under that shelter throw off all material miseries. We therefore offer our respectful obeisances unto your lotus feet.
The first point, these all are the devotees of the Lord. That's what Vishnu Chakra Thakur was mentioning before. And second point is my question to all of you. These are not the prayers where the whole creation have happened. Nothing have happened. This is just right at the initial stages. So how come this Devatas is saying the sages under that shelter, when there are no sages, no devotees, how come this prayer makes sense? What are they talking about it? And second thing, how are they speaking? The body is also not created. How are they speaking? How are they offering prayer? And when the devotees are not there only, so how are they addressing the devotees or the sages who take shelter? They throw the samsara dukkha far, far away. And the answer is given in Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's purport. Please read the highlighted portion.
The devotees and not others quickly throw far away at the root, Uru, the suffering of material life. When one cast off to a great distance a leech attached to one's body with force, it does not come back. They throw it quickly at the root and at a great distance.
Okay, now, how come they're mentioning about sages? What he writes, go ahead, Chakravarti Thakur.
Those who do not take shelter.
Next line.
It should be understood that even if there were no devotees present at the beginning of creation, by knowledge of the conclusion of all scriptures, these knowers of truth, knowers of past, present, and future, proclaim this.
So they were knowers of the truth and they knew of the past, present, and future. That's how they were able to speak. So this is the opinion Prabhupada writes. Please read what Prabhupada writes.
This is the opinion of the demigods who are not only well versed in Vedic knowledge but are also seers of the past, present, and future. The opinions of the demigods are valuable because the demigods are authorized to hold position in the affairs of universal management. They are appointed by the Lord as his computational servants.
So allow us to take shelter, how devotees take shelter. In the next verse, they say, allow us to take shelter of your lotus feet, of just like the jivas take shelter of your lotus feet. Dhatur yadasmin bhava isha jiva. Tapatrena vihatana sharma. Atman labante bhagavam savangri. Chaya savityamata ashrayema. So here these devatas address the Lord as Dhatar, which means father. Isha, Dhatar, father, Isha, controller, Bhagwan, the Supreme Personality Godhead. Tapa Trayena, which refers to three Kaleshas, Adhibhautik, Adhidev, Adhyatmik Kalesha. Tapa Trayena Avihata Nasharma, like that is mentioned. Those who have not taken shelter of a lotus feet, they always continue to suffer. Atman labante bhagavam stavangri chayam. Those who have taken shelter of your lotus feet. Sa vidyam, which is the root of all knowledge. Ata ashrema, such persons are saved from the tapatrayana of this material world. Please read out.
O,
Prabhupada's translation.
O Father, O Lord, O personality of Godhead, the living entities in the material world can never have any happiness because they are overwhelmed by the three kinds of miseries. Therefore, they take shelter of the shade of your lotus feet, which are full of knowledge, and we also thus take shelter of them. O maintainer.
No, that's okay. Now, this is something interesting. Here, there is a little difference in the previous prayer and this prayer. Now they say, Chayam savidyam atashayima, your lotus feet is one who takes shelter of your lotus feet, or your lotus feet is full of knowledge. Why this is being talked about here? So, 2-3 things which I mentioned here. Just 1 second, I was looking at some important point. Let us begin to offer prayer. Okay, there's some very important lesson which I'm kind of missing. Where did I wrote? I'll figure it out later on. Fine. Or maybe we'll discuss at the end of the prayers what actually this teaches us. It teaches us something very important. Fine. Please read out. Why it is said which are full of knowledge. The reason is people say, the cause of a suffering is avidya. And you can only uproot avidya through knowledge. So those who take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, they are themselves awarded with the complete knowledge. There are these Mayavadis, empirist philosopher, they don't take shelter of the Lord. Even they get knowledge of the Vedic scriptures, yet their knowledge is incomplete and their suffering does not get destroyed. Their destination, which they aim, is still the same destination which people get after being killed by the Lord. Where did Kamsa go? They all get Sayujya Mukti. Similarly, these impersonalists also get Sayujya Mukti. So what is the difference between them and those who are actually haters of Krishna? So like that, the knowledge is incomplete unless one takes shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. That is how this way they are kind of praying. And that is what is highlighted by Srila Prabhupada and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Please read out that highlighted portion of the purport.
Is rooted in ignorance, and by knowledge it is alleviated. Can those who possess knowledge get freedom from suffering? This verse explains that bhakti alone is the process. Without worshipping your feet, the jivas do not get peace in this material world. Asmin bhave. Within the self Atman, even if they have knowledge, savidyam.
So which verses tells us if you worship the Lord, then you are awarded with the knowledge? You don't have to aspire for knowledge, just render service to the Lord. What are those verses? Tesham ivanukam partham. Okay, the cause is mercy, but prior to that is more important, buddhi yogam. Like, and what verse from Srimad Bhagavatam? Where it said, if you worship, if you render devotional service, then you're awarded with the knowledge. Yeah, what is that? Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Jnana Chayad. Okay. Janayati Yasu Vairagya Jnanam Chayad Ahitukam. And that is what Srila Prabhupada mentions in his purport also. Like that, we don't have to make an endeavor to acquire knowledge separately, but taking to the service is the most important like this. And those who do philosophical speculation, even they have knowledge, they're simply wasting their time. So how do jivas take shelter? That is being described here. And now even Paramhamsas also take shelter of you or your lotus feet. So my dear Lord, please allow us to take your shelter. Very important verse. Marganti yatte mukhapadmani desh. Chanda spurne rishayo vivekte. Yasyagamarshod sarit varaya. Padam padam tita padha prapanna. Very beautiful analogy is given. Marganti, which means to search out. Marganti yatte mukhapadma niddesh. So there are rishayo vivekte. Vivekte means the pure mind or clear mind. The sages with the pure mind, they're always searching for the nest of the lotus face of the Lord. How are they searching? Nidesh Chandha Nidesh Chandha Spuranahe. By flying on the wings of the Vedic scriptures or the Vedic knowledge, By flying on the wings or by sitting on the wings of the Vedic knowledge, they are always searching after the nest of your lotus-like face. That is the first thing. Second thing, Yasyagamarsho the Saridvaraya. Sarid means river. And here it refers to Mother Ganges. Padam Padam Tita Padha Prapanna. And what do those Paramahamsas do? Second thing they do, one is the first two lines means they study Vedic scriptures very nicely. And in the study of Vedic scriptures, they're doing what? They're not looking for impersonal conception. They're just searching out for Krishna. Mukha Padma, so they are looking for the lotus-like face of the Lord in their all study. And then what they do? Saridvaraya. So it is mentioned, Yasyag Marshad, Yasya whose, Agha means sin, Marsh Udaha, those who have got freedom from all sinful reactions, Saritvaraya, the best of the rivers, Mother Ganges, Padam Padam, Tita Padha Prapanna, they take shelter of the Mother Ganges, and like that they worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Please read Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's translation.
We have taken shelter of your
So he
lotus.
mentioned there are two ladders, there are two things going on. One is a sincere study of Vedic scriptures with an objective to search out Krishna or to glorify Krishna. And second is to take shelter of Mother Ganges. Why? Because Mother Ganges have appeared from the toenail of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's like Charanamrit. That's the whole point here. Please read out.
We have taken shelter of your lotus feet, a place of pilgrimage, which give rise to the Ganga, and which sages seek in their minds by the following the bird of the Vedas situated in the nest of your lotus mouth.
Okay, Prabhupada makes it more poetic actually. Please read out.
The lotus feet of the Lord are by themselves the shelter of all places of pilgrimage. The great clear-minded sage, carried by the wings of the Vedas, always search after the nest of your lotus-like face.
That's it. That's the point. How poetically is this described? Carried by the wings of the Vedas, they always search out after the nest of your, which means they carefully study the Vedic scriptures. So, two ladders of happiness constructed by your mercy to attain direct vision of your lotus feet. What are those? These are the things. Please read out.
They search by the bird of the Vedas, which are sitting in the nest of your mouth. Homeless people looking for shelter at the base of some.
So now Vishwanath Chakravarti gives an example that homeless people who are looking for shelter, what they do, they wander here and there in the forest and they follow the trajectory of the birds because they know at the end of the day, birds gonna go back to the nest. And where is the nest? On the tree. So they follow the birds and finally they come to the tree, and under the shelter of the tree, they take rest. Similarly, the devotees of the Lord, they follow the Vedic scriptures in pursuance to find Krishna or to discover Krishna through the Vedic study. So the point which is mentioned, the birds of the Vedas which are sitting in the nest of your lotus mouth, and which is that actually which indicates here is Bhagavad Gita, which has been spoken by the Lord by his own lotus mouth. Therefore, Prabhupada writes, if you go at the end of the purport, this is what Prabhupada writes. Please read out this part.
The river Ganges and Bhagavad Gita are chief sources of transcendental happiness for mankind. An intelligent person can take shelter of them to go back home, back to Godhead. Even Shiva Shankaracharya recommended that a little knowledge in Bhagavad Gita and the drinking of a little quantity of Ganges water can save one from the punishment of Yamraj.
Okay, so now question arises, how do we take shelter? How do we take shelter? They're talking about shelter like the devotees, like the other living entities, like the Paramahansa sakes. How do we take shelter of the Supreme Personality Godhead? That's a prayer offered in 42nd verse. Yashrathaya shrutavataya cha bhaktya samrajyamane hridaye avadhyaya ज्ञानेन वैराग्यबलेन धीरा व्रजेम तत्ते अंघ्रि सरोजपीठम्. So hearing from Guru produces detachment and affinity for Lord. Yash Shraddhaya Shrutavatya cha Bhaktya. So one Shraddhaya means faith, and also Prabhupada writes eagerness. Shruta, one who hears, cha Bhaktya, in devotion. What happens? Samrajyamane, his hridaya becomes cleansed. Abadhaya, jnanena, vairagena, balena. So he develops jnana and vairagya. Dhira, varajema tatte angri saroj pitham. Like that, one attains the shelter of your lotus feet. So how does happens? By hearing about the Lord from the bona fide guru. Like that, the process of surrender begins. Please read the translation. We can read Vishnu Chakra Thakur's translation. Any online devotee?
We should take shelter of your lotus feet, realizing those feet in a pure heart by bhakti, heard with faith through the mouth of Guru, by attaining realization of that sweetness which gives strong disgust with the material world, people become wise.
Go ahead. Vishnu.
Realizing those feet in should we read the highlighted one?
Yes.
Realizing those feet in one's heart purified by bhakti, which contains the path taught from the mouth of Guru, people become wise, dhira. By that realization of sweet taste, jnanena, which gives distaste for all else. If there is honey in the arka tree, why go to mountain?
There is no necessity of labor in searching out the Vedas, as was mentioned in the previous verse. And here Prabhupada writes a very beautiful point. He says, what is the miracles of bhakti? The miracles of meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord, the very first line, with eagerness and devotion are so great that no other process can compare to it. In other words, if someone is able to peacefully sit and hear about Krishna, the result of that hearing is so great that no other process can award it to you. And then Prabhupada justifies why. He says the minds of the materialistic persons are so disturbed that it is almost impossible for them to search after the supreme truth by personal regulative endeavors. See, apart from Bhakti Yoga, the other way when you can search out for Krishna is Jnana Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga. Karma Yoga is not exactly about that. Karma Yoga is largely about purifying yourself, which is almost a part of Bhakti Yoga, where you know why the purpose is performed. And now we are dedicating the results of our work with an intention to purify our senses. And then gradually, when such a person is directed by a bona fide guru, then this Karma Yogi becomes qualified for Bhakti Yogi. So if you see, there is Jnana Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga, where a person makes an endeavor on his own to search out for the absolute truth. And that's the reason Krishna says in 7th chapter, Bahunam Janvanam Ante Jnanavan Mam Prapadete. After many, many lifetimes, Prabhupada is making a point, the minds of materialistic persons are so disturbed. Who is so much bothered and has time to search out for absolute truth through his personal endeavors? It is just not possible. Therefore, Bhakti Yoga is so simple. Just come and attend the class. Everything will happen. And that's how we innovate. We bring in our innovation, that how to attract the audience. So all of you are preachers, all of you have an experience. At least with my experience, I can say, somehow by hook and crook, we have to just make sure person gets to hear. Unless hearing happens, until that point of time, person has all his kind of misconceptions. But once if a person can come and sit and hear, and the philosophy that Srila Prabhupada has given, so far it's a different thing. Everyone may not become devotee. So far, I have not found anyone saying that you are wrong. They would accept everything what you said. It's a different thing. They may not become a devotee. Bhoga Aishwarya Prasaktanam, that's okay. Secondly, all their misconception goes away that we are dangerous people. Sometimes they see this God people are very dangerous. Why they see? Because if you go inside ISKCON, these people are so serious, they make everyone sadhu and sadhvi. They destroy any and every hope of a sense gratification. Hai na? Like you all in college preaching, I guess that would be the fear of the young man and young woman also. If you go and interact with these takla sadhus, they'll, they have shaven up their heads and they'll shave up all your material desires also. And I have so many abhilasha in my life. How can I not fulfill it? So people are afraid. There's a very interesting story that comes in Mahabharata in that relation. Everything has ended. The war has ended, Rajaswi Yagya, not Rajaswi Yagya, Ashwamedh Yagya, everything has concluded. And when Krishna was about to leave, this is the last time when Krishna is departing. And after that, Krishna departs from this world after some time. That point of time, Yudhishthira Maharaj made a very interesting statement. He said, "My dear Lord, before you leave, I would like you to fulfill my desire." So Lord said, "What desire?" He said, "I would like to get married to a very beautiful girl." So Krishna said, "Hey, Yudhishthira." Now, when the war happened, he was already 110-year-old because he was almost 11 or around 15 years elder, 11, not 11, more than 15 years elder to Krishna. Krishna was around 89 years, which makes him around 105 years. And then the Ashwamedh Yagya happened, which was he was a little old. So Krishna said, "Hey, why do you want to get married? My dear Lord, I want to remove these misconceptions of the people. They think those who take to your bhakti, they don't enjoy life. By getting married to a beautiful woman, I want to show them, even by getting married, you can still practice bhakti and be your devotee." So like that, the point comes there in the Mahabharata, interestingly. So anyways, I don't know from where to where I went. The point, the miracles of bhakti I was saying, Prabhupada says, somehow by hook and crook, the person, we should facilitate hearing. If the person can hear, if the person is fortunate enough, they can attain the success of yoga process. That is a point which is highlighted largely. Because they're so disturbed, it is not possible for them to follow any other regulative principles or any other yoga path like that. Culture of self-knowledge can bring about detachment from material affection, and the greatest attachment is sex life. And finally, how this all happens? Devotional service means Ado Shraddha Sadhu Sangha. Please read out the last paragraph.
Devotional service entails being initiated by a bona fide spiritual master and following his instructions in regard to hearing about the Lord. Such a bona fide spiritual master is accepted by regularly hearing from him about the Lord. The improvement in knowledge and the detachment can be perceived by devotee as an actual experience. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu strongly recommended this process of hearing from a bona fide devotee. And by following this process, one can achieve the highest result, conquering all other methods.
I remember we had gone for this temple opening, and I had the service of taking care of all Prabhupada disciples, which we had done it before for another event. So His Holiness Lokanath Maharaj called for some of us to go there. So when I went there, so I was leading the group. We have this sannyasi disciple of His Holiness Lokanath Swami Maharaj, who was military officer before, right? Hi, His Holiness Ram Govind Maharaj, right? So when I reached there, His Holiness Ram Govind Maharaj was there, just waiting outside the room of His Holiness Lokanath Swami Maharaj. So I guess Partha Sati Prabhu was there. He introduced, "Maharaj, these are the devotees who have come from Pune." So we were around 5, 6 of us. Maharaj looked at us and he said, "Oh, this smiling brahmacharis is an evidence they have come from Pune." Now, that's not the point for which I'm making this. The point comes now. And then he said, "You know why these brahmacharis are always smiling or they have a smiling face? Because in ISKCON Pune, there is a wonderful culture of hearing." This is what he said. He said, because they have such a wonderful culture of hearing, therefore these brahmacharis are always in bliss. Something here which is mentioned, hearing is so important. And the opportunity that we get here to hear is nowhere as much as we have the opulence to hear about Krishna. Text number 43, what is the result of hearing? Vishwasya janma siti samyamarthe कृतावतारस्य पदाम्बुजं ते व्रजेम सर्वे शरणं यदीशा स्मृतं प्रयच्छति अभयं सुपुंसाम्. Vishwasya Janma Sthiti Samyamarthe, you have taken this responsibility of creation, maintenance, and dissolution, Krita, which means for this purpose, Krita avatar, to do all this thing, you accept so many different kind of incarnations. Vrajema sarve sharanam yadisha, it behooves us to take the shelter of your lotus feet. And what happens? Smritam prayachati, one who remembers your lotus feet is awarded with abhayam swapumsam. He is awarded with all kind of fearlessness. Please read out the translation. Vishnu Thakur.
O Lord, we all take shelter of lotus feet of you, who take forms as avatars for creating, maintaining, and destroying the universe. We take shelter of those feet which, remembered by devotees, give them fearlessness.
So Prabhupada says Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh are the three presiding deities of this world. Brahma for creation, Vishnu for maintenance, Ishwar, Lord Shiva for ignorance, for destruction. Yet Brahma and Lord Shiva is said to be demigods, not Bhagwan. And Prabhupada makes a simple point because whenever they are in trouble or whenever there is a problem in the Srishti, they all take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So who is a Devata? Devta is one who takes shelter of the Lord, and who is an Asura who does not take shelter of the Lord. Like that, Prabhupada talks about it. And then comes text number 44. But who fails to take shelter of the Supreme Personality of God? Who cannot surrender? Who cannot take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord? Yasanubande asati deha gehe mamahamiti uta duragrahana Pumsa suduram vasatopi puriyam bhaje matatte bhagavan padabjam. Yet those, or because sa anubandhe, those who are too attached, bandhe, bound to what? Asati. Asati deha gehe. Deha means body, geha means house. Mamaham, those who are caught in the conception of I and mine. Iti, mamaham, iti udha, dura grahanam. So they are caught up into this great deep well. Pumsam suduram vasatopi puryan. In other words, although the Lord resides in the heart of every living entity, because of their misconception, considering of I and mine, of being attached to their body and household affairs, the one who is so closer to them, they can never discover such a person. Please read the translation and purport by Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur.
O Lord, person who are
Highlighted.
Okay. We worship your lotus feet, which are hard to attain for man with strong attachment to body, house, and accessories, thinking of me and mine, even though you dwell in their bodies. Bhakti is hard to attain for unfortunately jivas. The Lords live in manifest and unmanifest forms in his cities. Cities Puriam
Puriya means
of
cities. All right. So how can these people be reformed? Prabhupada mentions they can be reformed. How they can? I mean, this is important because there's something going to happen in the next verse, which is the most important purport of this whole chapter. Yes, how these people can be reformed.
In this age of Kali, the process of hearing Krishna Katha is the most effective means to attain release from unwanted family affection and thus find permanent freedom in life.
Read the
age
last
of
line.
Kali,
Read the last line.
Therefore, people should be trained to hear only Krishna Katha by all means in order to get relief from all miseries.
Okay, so these are the people who are too much caught up to the idea of I and mine, their sense gratifier. They can be reformed if a culture of hearing Krishna Katha is established. However, there is another class of people who cannot take shelter of your lotus feet. And even if culture of hearing Krishna Katha is established, it's very difficult to reform these people. Who are these people? Described in text number 45. Tanve asat vritibhir akshibhir Parahritant manasa paresha Atho na pashyanti urugayanunam Yete padanyas vilasa lakshya. Who are these people even for whom culture of hearing is established? They cannot get reformed easily. They are known as offenders. And this is the 5-star purport, very, very important purport actually of Prabhupada. We'll focus on Prabhupada's writing here only. Let's go with the Prabhupada translation. Somebody online would like to read? Hare Krishna. Any devotee who is online, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, please. Proper translation.
O great Supreme Lord, offensive persons whose internal vision has been too affected by external materialistic activities cannot see your lotus feet, but they are seen by your pure devotees, whose one and only aim is to transcendently enjoy your activities.
So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur raises a question. Are, who are these people who are not able to take to pure bhakti, which is so easy to attain by associating with so many devotees who are wandering all over the world? And we find that in our outreach also. Who cannot? Those who are offenders. And that is what being described here. And some two beautiful examples Prabhupada gives in the purport. I'll give you the summary, then we'll look into the purport a little bit. Prabhupada gives an example of hunter, Mara, that person. When he met Narad Muni, he received Narad Muni well, and all that discussion happened. And then finally he went back home, and the family said, well, why should we take part in your karma? You should suffer. You know the long story short. And Narad Muni, he said, okay, Narad Muni, I would like to get reformed. Please help me. Narad Muni said, chant Ram. He couldn't chant because of sinful past. So he said, Narad Muni said, well, try Mara. And he did, as you know of it. He chanted Mara, Ram, Ram, and he got purified. And when Narad Muni, along with Angira Muni, came back again, now he was even not willing to step onto the end. That was the level of purification. So this person who was sinful, this is something very important for your preaching application, at least to be how do you filter out people. Now, one who was sinful could get reformed when he followed the instruction of a bona fide guru like this. However, Prabhupada gives an example in this purport, only very beautiful example of Nalakuvera Manigriva. Now, Nalakuvera Manigriva and the hunter cannot be compared. They were personal associates of Lord Shiva, sons of Kuvera. They were Devatas, which means they already knew the greatness of Vishnu. They are put into that position, which means they must have performed great pious deeds. Hunter, which indicates must have done many sinful activities. As a result, he got that body also. So hunter didn't have a good present nor the good past, and future was doomed. And Nalkuvera Manigruva must have had great past because of which they got this birth. Their present was incredible. Now, when Narad Muni came, the same Narad Muni came, Nalkuvera Manigriva did not get that mercy that the hunter got. They got cursed. That is what Prabhupada raises a question here. Why? Because Nalkuvera and Manigriva were offenders. They offended whom? Narad Muni. Hunter did not offend Narad Muni, but Nalkuvera and Manigriva offended Narad Muni. Therefore, they got cursed. But ultimately, we know the curse is also blessing. The curse of a sadhu is also blessing. The point here is Nalkuvera and Manigriva did not got delivered immediately. The hunter got delivered immediately in the same to take birth again as the trees, and they had to wait for thousands and millions of years before Krishna came and took birth and rectified the whole thing. That is a point here which is mentioned. And second thing is the theory of reflection. I would leave that as a homework because time is running short. Let's finish this discussion. So this was a main point. Hunter versus two sons of Kuvera, like that. The story is mentioned in the last paragraph of the purport. You can read at leisure. And the second concept is a theory of reflection, which the impersonalists misconstrue. They have a misunderstanding that Prabhupada mentions and clarifies. Let's go to text number 36. So these two categories, the sinful people do not take to Krishna consciousness, but if you create a culture of Krishna Katha, they can take to Krishna consciousness. And the last verse which we read, offenders. These two categories of people cannot take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. The question arises, what is the destination of devotees who take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord? They go back to Vaikuntha. So text number 46 and 47 are other two very important verses where devotees are compared with impersonalists. Text number 46 talks about the destination of devotees, and text number 47 will talk about no destination of impersonal. They don't go anywhere. Effectively, they stay in the material creation. Panena te deva katha sudhaya प्रवृद्ध भक्त्या विशदाशयाये वैराग्य सारं प्रतिलभ्य बोधम यथांजसानि वियुर अकुंठ दिष्ण्यम. So where do they go? What is the destination? Akunta Dishnyam, which means they get to go to Vaikuntha planet. Katha Sudhaya. Panena, panena means to drink. Panena te deva katha sudhaya. After drinking the nectar of katha, Krishna katha, pravritta bhaktya visha dashaya. Pravritta means being enlightened, and then bhaktya means bhakti, vishad ashaya, the people with great service attitude. Three things: being purified, the mood of devotion, and a great service attitude. Such a people who develop natural renunciation, vairagya saram. What, what is the destination? Akunta Dishnam. They go back to Vaikuntha. Please read out the highlighted purport by Vishnu Chokasi Thakur.
Just as devotees are very happy from the beginning of practice, the jnanis are full of misery from the beginning of practice. Two verses now speak of this difference between bhakti and jnana. Vairagya saram, essence of detachment, is strength achieved beyond merging in Brahman. One achieves realization, vodham, from strong bhakti. Having attained realization of the sweetness of the Lord, one attains Vaikuntha, Akuntha Dhishnam. This is according to Sridhar Swami.
So the devotees, the whole life is blissful, but jnanis, their whole path is miserable, and their end is also miserable. That is the point is being highlighted here. The devotees only has to hear about Krishna Katha, which are as simple as anything in ordinary life. And he also acts very simply. Whereas a mental speculator, they have to do so much hard work, jugglery of words, which are not even facts. And they have a make show for the maintenance of an artificial impersonal status. I am Brahman, you are Brahman, Hari Bol. In spite of his strenuous efforts to attain perfect knowledge, the impersonal attains merging. I have already said, they attain the same destination which the people killed by Krishna attains. So is that a destination? And what happens there? Nothing happens there. But devotees go to Vaikuntha where they develop rasa. They have particular rasa with Krishna. They have a relationship with the Lord. That's the point which is mentioned. With a service or serious attitude, the devotees throw away all achievements like so much dust, and he accepts only devotional service, the transcendental culmination. And then comes about jnanis. Tatha pare chatma samadhi yoga. Balena jitva prakatim balishtham. Twameva dhira purusham vishanti. Tesham shramasya tu sevayate. Tesham shama, kitna hard work karte hain ye log, and they don't get anything. Na tu sevayate, whereas the devotees, in their endeavors, there is no hard work, there is no labor, and is all blissful. Please read the translation. Read the translation by Vishnu Chakati Thakur.
Others desiring only liberation conquer strong material energy
So
by
tatha pare cha atma samadhi yoga. They get to the path of liberation, balena, on their strength, jitva. They won over what? Prakritim, balishtham, over the three modes of material nature. On their strength, they do that. What happens? Go ahead.
conquer strong material energy by mental concentration and merge with the Lord. They become distressed in order to do this, whereas by bhakti there is no pain.
So, a very beautiful discussion Vishnu Chakra Thakur does, and we'll do that discussion and conclude for the day as time is about to get over. And the discussion is as follows. Well, this is not need anyways. TK. And the discussion is as follows. So, Vishnu Chakati Thakur is saying, Oho, Jnanis do Shrama, which means they do hard labor, and then they become tired. But what about devotees? Do they do hard labor? How many of you get tired once in a while doing services? Yes or no? Janmashtami is about to come. So Vishnu Chakri Thakur is raising a question. By Jnanis do hard labor. Now, hard labor in the sense of their day-to-day practice and whatnot. But they get fatigued. They get tired. Whereas devotees, what about them? Yes, they also have to do hard labor. And the example is the case study of Vidura only. How much hard work he had to do? I don't know if you know, I don't know if I made this point. It was not that Vidura was thrown away from Hastinapur, what is being described in the third canto only. That was a second time. He was thrown away from Hastinapur way before the Vana Parva start. The third book of Mahabharata started. Before that only he was thrown away. The moment Then the dice came and ended, and the Pandavas were leaving. Vidurji was there when Pandavas were leaving. And when Vidurji saw Pandavas leaving, he came back to Dhritarashtra. And he spoke to Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra, what have you done? Don't you see? Bhima was so angry. He had taken a vow to kill all your 100 sons. So like that, he began to counsel Dhritarashtra, and Dhritarashtra became very angry. He said, well, you always favor Pandavas. Why don't you also leave with them to forest? And Vidurji left. And Pandavas came and settled at Kamyaka 1, and they were staying there. And Vidurji came and settled and stayed with them. However, his exile from the kingdom was only 1 day long. Dhritarashtra was missing his association. So that time he sent Sanjaya, go and get Vidurji. And Vidurji was brought back the very next day. And however, now as we read in the third canto, he was sent away and he was not invited back again. So Vidurji did hard labor all his life. Yet he didn't find success. But the point is, he was not tired. And the proof is, he went back again. He attempted again. That's the difference. That's the difference between Jnani and Bhakta. Jnani tries, a lot of hard labor and becomes fatigued. He said, Naiti, nothing doing. He leaves the Himalaya cave. He comes to the city, opens hospitals, charitable trust, and forgets whatever for which objective he went. And devotees tries. He also does a hard labor, but he never gives up because that seva only what gives relish to a devotee. And that relishment will only come when we are not result oriented. If we remain result oriented, I guess what happens to Jnani becomes fatigue. Is what also going to happen with us. We'll also become fatigued. अरे इतना समय से प्रचार कर रहा हूं, एक भी लड़का फंस नहीं रहा. Then fatigueness आनी शुरू हो जाती है, tiredness. So that's the difference here which is mentioned. So it's mentioned devotees are not tired, and the proof is Vidurji. With that, we'll conclude here. I'm sorry I went 1 minute extra today. And the remaining, we'll do it tomorrow. There are only a few verses remaining. And we'll come to the 6th chapter onwards. The 8th chapter anyways have less verses. We'll be able to quickly finish it up. So with that, thank you all for your kind attention. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. तो क्रिएशन आज यहीं समाप्त होती है. आगे सेकेंडरी क्रिएशन शुरू होगी अगले दिन, कल से 6ठे अध्याय से.